to ALGS. The Split One playoffs have begun. It's time. The best crowd in esports. Make some noise. They're running on me. As we get ready for game number one.
Look at the bodies. It's a graveyard down here.
Can he get the double? Yes, he does. Furholm going for the triple kill to kick off the ALGS playoffs in London.
He's going to be hitting some big
Oh
shots.
my goodness, the damage.
The Bravers are finally landing.
Guard is going to win this game.
Ascend will pick up the win.
Oh, he was like, he punched him.
Are you kidding me?
He's on main. It should work out. Peekaboo. Let's go with the Braver. He's going to go in and finish off the damage as well.
Setting a world record.
23 kills. $1 million is on the line today. It is a shootout. I'm going to move forward to become the champions here in London. You get the damage here. TSM up in the skies. How's going down for the hands? London belongs to TSM.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and to many of the teams here, very soon to be good night, Zephyr, as we are in our final pre-season qualifier, our fourth one of the, well, pre-season, and the last chance that you've got to make it into Pro League. Zephyr, let's talk a little bit about this, bring up the overall calendar of the year so we can really put this in context, but suffice it to say that tonight, stakes are pretty darn high.
That's right, Dia. For the last 3 weeks, we have seen a plethora of pro, challenger, and anything in between talent compete for one of those coveted 8 extra slots here in the Pro League. As a result, it all solidifies here tonight. The final preseason qualifier, the last team to win will be settled, and then, of course, the 4 others top in the point standings to go alongside them.
Exactly. Tonight's preseason qualifier does technically work just like every other one. It's just that because it's the last, we get to do a bunch of math at the end, which is, as you know, Zephyr, my favorite thing to do live and on air. Over the course of today, we'll be playing a 6-game series. 3 of the games will take place on World's Edge. The next 3 will take place on Stormpoint, and it is using your standard ALGS scoring. So you'll get 12 points for a win. Drop that down to 1 point for if you place above 15th, nothing below that, points per elimination. You know it, you've seen it a million times. There are, however, points being used in the background, and for every stream this season, preseason, I have said, let's not talk about them yet. Zephyr, let's finally talk about what's been going on in the background this whole time and how it's going to impact the 4 additional teams that get sent on.
Well, I'll tell you right now, ranging from a point score of 0 all the way to 1,500 with a win, which is kind of crazy because I don't even think that matters. You ultimately will pile on those qualifier points, and then at the end of the day, the totals ranging from all of our preseasons will combine with the 20 that you see in this final lobby as well. So, if you managed to make it through and through today and all of the other previous weeks, it's the perfect opportunity for you to slot yourself in.
Yeah, this is a very tight race. We'll get into the numbers in just a second. We should talk about our maps being split. We'll play the first 3 on World's Edge, the next 3 on Stormpoint, and now let's go ahead and jump into the teams. Talk about them a little bit and about their individual chances, because as we said, it is very close. And, we were debating this a little bit. How exactly we want to go about this. There are 5 teams that are in a really, really good spot. One specifically in a better place. So where do we want to start, Zephyr?
I think it would be remiss not to bring up the fact that the boys have performed so well in these last preseason qualifiers, and the fact that they come into today knowing they at minimum get 900 points is enough for us mathematically, and everyone else, hopefully, who is a big fan of this, to know that they have qualified. The boys are one of those official Pro League teams right off of the bat, but everyone else is still up in the air.
And when you say everyone else, it gets increasingly severe for those teams that we haven't seen in nearly as many finals. There
Yeah.
are 4 teams specifically: 202, 3 Dragons, Stay Healthy, and LVH. Those 4 teams are actually feeling pretty comfortable today. And if one of those 5 teams wins, it becomes a whole lot easier for the other 4 to say, all right, well, we placed decently today. We qualified. Every other team in the lobby, that's 20 minus 5, 15, 3/4 of the lobby needs to win today or forfeit their chances of making it into Pro League this split.
Oof. It's even more damning when you say it like that, down into the pits of several months of more challenger play for these teams who have worked so hard here. One big factor, though, that I want to bring up that's going to throw a wrench into a lot of today's plans and a lot of today's predictions is the fact that there are still 15 teams that could walk away with a win that don't have a point score that realistically matters here, right? If any one of them are able to pick up a win, it is very likely that we see a major shakeup regarding the quote-unquote 5 or 6 teams who are confirmed.
It would absolutely knock one of them out, and I think that now is when we start talking about semifinals, what that's meant so far, and expectations coming into the day, because the boys are a team that, as we talked about, gets to do a little bit of a victory lap here. They've done very well so far. Did finish first in their semifinals group yesterday, and so they're, of course, expected to do quite well. Curse of semifinals, etc. Let's not pin too much on that. 202 followed them up in their own group, and then it was Wanted. Wanted are the team, or a team rather, that very much needs to win today in order to make anything happen. On the other side, however, our first 3 teams coming out of the second group were 40% worse, with 74 points, the most that anybody got in a semifinals lobby yesterday. 3 Dragons right behind them by 1 point, and then Tohu Tonut.
For many, and I mean many of the EMEA fans out there, I have a suspicion regarding who they might be supporting here today as we look at the final PSQ. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a plethora of fans. But for the likes of 40% worse, it has been a hard-fought journey, but most notably missing out on the most recent PSQ is something that could come back to bite them because they don't have a chance. They have to win no matter what. There's no amount of math, no 1440 points that will put them on the pedestal to Pro League.
And that's a very scary reality to be dealing with, but in clutch situations like this, I think that most players here will pride themselves on being people who can be reliable, and that's going to be the biggest test for today, especially when we consider that every other team in this lobby is entering with the exact same information that we are. Everybody knows that it's win or nothing, and that is, in my opinion, Zephyr, when Apex really is at its best. When it's not just a game of points accumulation to place top 3, get in the prizing pool, but when it is literally win or die.
I'll tell you what, it is as stacked as it's going to be, especially from, well, I'll say 19 of our teams today as they're fighting for some of those last spots. But ultimately, if you can't do the math, if it's hard to figure out and you are pedaling away trying to hyperfixate on what you exactly need to do, the real answer is just win, right? There is one easy way to solidify that you are going to be joining the rest of those excellent EMEA teams in Pro League during Split 1, and that's, well, becoming the victor.
If the math confuses you, there's always Battlefy later. It's
true.
all right. We have plenty of time. Pro League is going to start in late January, so you have got time on time to figure it out, to do the math for yourself, to get other people to do it for you. But for right now, we've got no time at all, Zephyr, because game 1 of 6 has already begun. We're dropping onto World's Edge for the first time. It does seem that everybody, or rather, mostly everyone, has made it. And we should probably talk about this.
So I believe right off of the bat, and we'll check in with them potentially very soon here, 3 Dragons are down to a duo due to some interference this morning regarding the eligibility of Sunzi. So, at least right now, and I would assume with the play taking place immediately after this, it's very likely that Three Dragons will see issues regarding their qualifications if this is the ultimate case.
Now, fortunately for them, they have chosen to drop Dome, which does give them a way to, well, play things out pretty safely. And remembering that, of course, Three Dragons are one of our teams that is in points qualification range, even after what could be a poor performance today, there is still a chance for this team. So we could see a duo essentially qualify in. We'll find out how that works, however, as they've got to hike it all the way across the map. Our first ring is going over towards Skyhook and the surrounding area, and that's going to be a tough one, especially for a lot of our southern teams. Teams from Tree can actually do okay in scenarios like this, but Dome, Stacks, Mod, not going to have a good time, and even 40% worse should actually have a pretty difficult rotation in if they're not able to make it in through Lava Fissure.
Yeah, for me at least, though, I immediately look at the fact that we see LVH count down 2-2 in Fisher and Stay Healthy and Staging. The majority of those teams that you want to see on the top competing for those early leads have the opportunity to make quick, expedient rotations and arguably get to similar positions. And it's especially when we talk about the Skyhook region, where you get at least 10 to 16 teams able in a playable spot.
Because there are so many buildings over here, I am also curious who ends up taking Grandma's house, which is a really interesting spot to hold. Pretty flexible when it comes to your mid-game approach, but once it gets to late game, having to fight out of Grandma's house can be a little bit tough. This time it fortunately comes with a survey beacon, which may make that more enticing for teams that have chosen to run, say, a Bloodhound, like Three Dragons have with their limited resources.
Yeah. So for Three Dragons, what this will come down ultimately is the total of their points, but something that does bring, an interesting kind of perspective to this equation is ultimately they're probably looking to perform the best that they can, but with confirmations that might come through here, they're kind of at the whim of doing a lot or whatever they want, realistically speaking. And it's very similar to what we might see out of the boys later today. A lack of pressure and no real opportunity, or an already secured one, makes you a very dangerous player.
LVH have already encountered a little bit of danger themselves in Landslide. To stay healthy, get the exact same thing thrown back at them. A rotation stymied is now potentially going to be cut short even more. A little bit of shield healing and an arc star to buy them some time. Stay Healthy haven't lost a member yet, but they are taking so much damage. And with LVH on the exit to this, they'll make it into Landslide, but for how long can they keep this up with the boys on their tail?
This is what I'm scared about today. The boys, they have absolutely nothing to lose. Granted, walking away with the win would make it even easier for themselves, but the job is done. So that's going to put a different kind of fire underneath them. They're a team that excels getting aggressive. They love going for fights when they have the opportunity. And now knowing that they're completely safe to do so, no matter the result, I don't expect to ever see this team slow down regarding their decision making.
It certainly helps that they dropped essentially with a purple, 2 purples and a gold. Three Dragons not nearly so lucky have been caught up in a 3-way fight down by launch site. It's already claimed one team. Looks likely to claim them next. Oni trying to escape with a double smoke usage. Digi in hand, even during the early game, is going to feel really nice, but Villains right behind can chase this, can take their time on the craft, or the world is their oyster.
Now, this in itself is an incredibly interesting roster, given its star-studded nature between DefQ, of course, and Horizon here. Both heavy Pro League entities in the previous iterations that we saw from the ALGS, and now coming together to, quote-unquote, be the villains of this lobby and steal away one of those coveted spots.
They're off to a good start. An edge-rotating team as well, running with Conduit and Revenant, and with the 2 players that you mentioned already. This is a squad that wants to take fights, and we can look forward to Villains doing much the same thing as boys, being very aggressive, playing on the front foot, simply because they know that not only does their composition allow for it, but that if it works, it can get them a spot in Pro League when Many of these players, I think, already feel like they have what it takes to be there. Checking in with our map once again, it does look like everybody is starting to rotate in, if not having finished their rotation entirely in Skyhook, or at least everybody that's going to. The teams that you see hanging around the edge, I don't expect to start suddenly playing zone.
No, I think if they've made the decision to work with the edge, it's very likely something that caters to the playstyle, or more importantly, the position that they exist within here on World's Edge. You'll notice, though, mostly everyone has made their way through that initial zone. It's only the villains in their excursion against the three dragons who are truly delayed here. Something to watch out for, though, is this rotation from 40% worse. As they come through the north, a team like the boys is very likely to stick around in this area and count down further, which could pose a real threat, especially with Stay Healthy getting involved as well.
Was watching their evac tower in, and it looks like Stay Healthy, also pretty worried about this situation, are going to take the slightly riskier route, choosing to move through Monument with no teams in there. We know that it's going to be just fine. They, however, don't have that data. An NPC right ahead of both the boys and Stay Healthy who are moving in could cause a few problems as well. For 40% worse, their slow play will continue taking them over towards the western side of the map, but Skyhook is as it always has been. When we get a zone here, it's a lot of poke, a lot of 30-30s this season, perhaps some triple takes, but action, not so much. A little bit of a roof take right now, but unless one team is just crazy better than the other today, we shouldn't be seeing this result in too many kills.
Now, Native will try, but nonetheless, it is going to be a position that results in them taking to the floor below here after the roof take. Getting into that spot is, behead upon the heights of all of Skyhook there. Plenty of damage that'll push them into the situation. While, yes, Death Wish gets a little involved. They might shoot through a window or two. It's likely now that they share this space for the time being, at least until we get to that Zone 4 and things close out.
Whoa, we're just evac right on top of them. That is one sure way to hurt your chances at a late game. Unfortunately, for Excellence. Oh, they will have lost one, and unfortunately, even further, they will have lost their IGL.
Yeah, this is an issue in terms of... Skyhook is as simple as it gets. It is base tutorial for kind of understanding a lot of the presence of these teams and getting aggressive like that and creating or trying to take space when you're outside of this zone. You have to realize if you're coming this late into play, most spots are already going to be taken. It is a thankful opportunity that Excellence get themselves into this position nonetheless.
So let's think about this as well from the teams from an outside of Skyhook perspective, because you say most of these positions are taken, and with Skyhook continuing to be the focus of attention, there's likely going to be a few more teams that have to drip feed themselves in, especially from the eastern side of this ring. We know Handsome Men are going to be approaching from the north on the train line. Teams like Stay Healthy were coming in from the south last time we saw them, and they might be cut short here as NPC start to take chunks out of teams who are also on a late rotation.
It's going to be already a double drop with Yukabama and Tutu knocked out here, the final escaping member to take to the skies, a grav lift into the train line, but ultimately, completely decimated for the remnants of this game. And of course, no time for scrims, picked up by none other than Philzon with a massive, leaping ultimate Revenant.
There's so many jokes to make here, but I don't want to make fun of the players. It's just the name. It's just.
I like him.
It's a good name.
Oh,
NPC do pick up 3 KP. However, remember we mentioned there are other teams in the area, and villains are starting to walk up. Villains who we know want to take fights, who have triple reds, by the way.
Well, I'll tell you what, triple reds, and on top of that, the damage from behind. Div will be annihilated, though, looking for the full pickup, but realistically speaking, you're in a 1v2 situation. Diff now, with seconds to spare, is well within the zone, and most things have been cleaned up, but Calamitous making his appearance on the height here will immediately be pressured back.
From the train line, Handsome Men thought they could take this third party, but Villains just win this too quickly. They have too many resources at their disposals. Remember, they are another squad that is running Conduit, making these resets in between fights even easier. And that's to say nothing of the Revenant that they've picked up.
Oh.
Zone won't be putting the pressure on just yet, but these two squads will clash along with what is visually Stay Healthy, who are making their way in from Survey Camp, and 3 Dragons, who won't have time to rotate through the, certainly, western side of the ring, perhaps the southern bit if they want to try and take the tunnel, because no one else is there.
Now, notably, there is a huge chunk of space that is left available for this next pull or further pull into the western side zone, and that's just information that some teams don't have, both teams kind of betting for the eastern steps here. As a result, realistically speaking, when we get into that information being available, it's going to come down to who rotates quick enough to take one of these 2 or 3 buildings that are completely available. Funny enough, though, Dia, it allows the boys, who, as late as they are, as unpressured as they are, to come in and now have an excellent spot for this endgame.
If anybody knows where this ring is going, it should be the boys, but they have not been able to pick that up, and right now, having lost one, they may not even get to see the next ring close. 202 are pushing up on them. 202, who sure would like a win today. Their points are looking good, but this fight, at least with the initial drop, looks even better.
202 already, yes, with that drop, needs to follow through, though, in complete wiping. A nice energy barricade is going to limit the potential, but with the boys taking very good height here, they've got pressure to spare, especially with none other than a defensive bombardment coming down, something you don't get to see very often anymore.
And the boys cover every angle from the sky, and with Fako dropping, you've got another coming in. Faka finds another one clip. Could this be the 202 dream?
He needs to peek excellently here, able to find the first crack of the beam. A 30-30 hip shot available, but now double knockdown shields to play against. Gonna take the minor seconds ahead here to look for a Phoenix kit. That could be the breaking difference here, but those knockdowns, Dia.
This hasn't happened in the meanwhile. Didn't want to try and bait, and now coming in with full health, Rakafaka's car that has already claimed 2 lives could shut down the boys here in game 1. Shield heals come in. Conduit, the Conduit action, and it will be 202 that falls, but it was oh so close.
Rakafaka making an excellent claim for the reason that 202, after only 3 PSQs, is in such a confirmed spot. Sadly, though, that kill feed tells other stories for some of our closer point scoring teams. Stay Healthy as a duo, inevitably eliminated here. And I believe it was 40% worse that got involved. And I'll tell you what, if you are a Shiv Mandy fan, and Zerfer, huge shout out to Zerfer, this is an excellent position for your first game.
It's so weird to see a team that rotated in late basically perfectly predict zone. And while I'm putting that in air quotes, it's given them a massive advantage, one that villains are desperately fighting for and will have to do through multiple squads. Just King left alive. Nice bit of damage on the 99. You know, we saw Rakafaka do some pretty crazy stuff a second ago, though, so I'm gonna give it time. King goes for the reset. Insta push comes out, however, and villains continue to punish. Remember, however, that other teams are looking at this, so the longer this goes on, and it's going on for quite a long time, the worse villains' chance of survival gets.
And even worse than that, even with major damage and a couple melees to seal the deal, round 4 is closing, Dia. Seconds to spare. They've got to find a position in zone and get these revives.
They should be able to get both of them, and remember, with Conduit, perhaps make this a little bit easier. Native 8 will be rotating right to the north of them, with Scary having to expend an early grab lift just to get into the center of Skyhook. Not even the ring. Takes the northern path, and a catalyst wall right behind them does cut them off from other squads. Starting to make their way in. Lone and Aski do make their way towards the south end instead. Mumet takes a lot of damage.
Stuck underneath here will be the initial knock on Clone, but this is less than cover to work with. A single smoke from Emea keeps them in play, and a black hole does go awry, but it's still plenty of good ordinances that pressure and zone out ASCII here. Now down to a single member remaining. Emea literally is back up against the wall with a single knockdown to play around, stuck with no decision, eliminated in 12.
Very nice way to play that from Fluffle, continuing to keep the pressure up. Even as a duo, they know they have to play with confidence and take out as many teams that appear weak as possible. As soon as you get the first drop, you know that it's going to be your best shot at collecting KP and the extra couple points that you can grab after just one round. OKS fighting for their lives do permanently lose their catalyst, and these Watson cheese fences aren't quite connecting. They're going to get full push on the inside of this building. DipQ does trade one, but it will be Villains again that claim the life of another squad, and if DipQ keeps cooking like that,
I'll tell you what, for the Villains here, they have made a statement already. Even if they go out here, a massive chunk of their KP is going to support the starting points for this roster, even if they are able to survive. But that doesn't seem to be the case. With LVH just below them, they are free for the picking. King V with one, maybe potentially more from behind as well. This leaves just Vapes to survive.
Of course they're picking up more kills as we move further into this ring. Only one escape left for Vapes. Might be able to grief Villains on the way out. Energy Barricade does get released, and Villains are in fact suffering at the hands of it, not being able to push forward. They turn back onto Vapes, take him out. Saying goodbye to LVH on the other side of the ring. It's boys fighting for their lives, and up against 40% worse, might be able to do it.
2v2 situation. The boys will be picked off from a massive drop from above. For 40% worse, they have secured their side of zone. Meanwhile, for none other than the Villains, finally their reckoning comes. The heroes arrive here and send them out on the edge of our ring. Surprisingly, goddamn's allowed to survive, but Juice's got to pull off some stunting moves before he can pick up some of these revives.
We know 40% worse do have an entire side of ring to themselves. Have already started looking at this fight between Falafel and Tohu Tona. Juso's unable to get the reses just yet, but 40% worse are going to start taking space as another knock comes in. Finals Finders come in from the north, and now it's time for 40% worse to take position to prepare themselves for an endgame.
This is it. It's the perfect situation that guarantees that they have a numbers advantage, a 3v2. I mean, this is, dare I say, romantic, picture perfect, a 40% win bound to happen.
This is the dream game one for them, that's for sure, but they still need to close it out. 40% worse are not taking a lot of space, and while you illustrate that it's a 2 versus 3, center of the zone belongs to Finals Finders, and even off of damage like that, 40% worse aren't pushing up yet. They're about to hit Horizon ult time. This may be where, as the ults come online, 40% worse do feel a little bit more comfortable taking the fight, but you cannot blame them for being nervous.
No, and I wouldn't even say nervous, I would say respectful. With that lack of information in the chaos of this most recent zone, it's understandable to try to source out what might be a potential third in this equation. As this ring closes up, though, I am sure that this might be a solved problem for them, as space is beginning to be had here. I love the extra rotation out from Zeraphir now on the side to cover that right fence line, where as we start to see Final Finders pop up, it should be an easy trade of damage.
Ultimate cooldown reveals that Catalyst Wall will likely not be in play for the final ring, making it a bit more difficult for 40% worse to walk up through this open space. One more smoke in the canister for Shiv may be enough to move them forward to a place where they can feel a little bit safer with the cover they have. Playing around a pillar is not ideal. Now comes the ult. And Shiv is buying the team space that Finals Finders are quickly running out of.
Stuck from behind the fence line, it'll be Mandate from above here with the first major crack. Turns upon the fence line, make it one more here, drop 2, and send 40% worse as your game 1 champions.
A great way to play that out, and a patient one as well. Zephyr, you brought up that word in our final ring, and watching the way that 40% worse did take their time and waited for ultimate cooldowns crucially to come up, made all the difference between what could have been a scrappy endgame and what was in this case a very clean one. They do not make it look close, they pick up a win, and even after rotating into zone late, they predict that zone pretty darn perfectly.
Yeah, not even just within the predictions at hand here. More importantly than that, I am impressed with the quality that exists regarding how I dare say the ability for them to not only be so conscious in the power to win, play things out, and be careful, but also be a threat when necessary. One big factor of that win that we didn't get the chance to discuss is that, well, the boys were a huge thorn in their side that they were able to take down and eliminate.
That's very true. The boys, for as much as they did go hard in this game, couldn't make it the big game they wanted. However, they're going to keep rolling those dice. They're going to keep seeing if they can come up with one. We are going to take a small break and gather our points so we can come back with more information for you guys in game number 2. All right, we have the points. We did it. We made it happen, Zephyr. So let's take a look at them because game 2 is almost ready, and I am very ready.
All right, well, after our extended break, we're happy to bring you the fact that 40% worse, even with that win on their belt, are tied with the dangerous and scary villains of today's series here. At 19 points themselves, they run a tie for our first game, and even the finals finders with 9 themselves managed to pick up 9 KP, bringing an 18-point finish.
Being one of the very few teams to, and in one of the last 2 teams to survive the closure of Skyhook, and being the only ones that had to come from whatever happens when you get these massive exoduses from one side of the map, really worked out well for finals finders. They were able to pick up a lot of kills, and I like the fact that after this first game, the standings are so close because it kind of needs to be, Zephyr. There need to be some names that were not set at the start of the day coming into the top 3 over the first even half of the day to make this close. For 40% worse and villains and finals finders, all of them need a win today, where Tohutona does feel a little bit more comfortable with points.
I'll tell you what, when we're talking about comfortable with points, the likes of Stay Healthy, 202, LVH, and heck, I'll even throw Death Wish into the equation here now, are, not in a fantastic spot. It is going to be an incredibly late in very, very tough and tight battle here. And even being the difference between, say, 18th and 17th between 202 and Stay Healthy is one of those examples of what could make or break the distance for teams that have been so consistent at the top of our point standings.
With some squads coming in above them during the course of this game alone, 3 Dragons as a duo managed to place almost in the top 10 with Native 8 right above them. This was a real difficult journey in, as Skyhook does prove to be very difficult for teams that come from the south end of the ring. However, we'll be getting to change that up, I expect, as our second map on World's Edge is just about ready. And it's time for us to consider what will be changing as we move into game number 2. For things like, or for teams like the boys and villains, I don't expect a whole lot to actually shift around. They should still be running at everyone.
Well, as we jump in here, there's plenty of opportunities for most of our teams to still find their success, but the big thing that I'm looking at right now is the fact that currently, outside of 7th down, every single team that has the potential chance to win it, look great, and be in game 1, and potentially be a winner, is a new face here. A team that doesn't have the points to push behind themselves for the other 4 slots.
Let's see what ends up happening in our Legend Select. We did have quite a bit of Conduit Revenant. I expect that to stick around. Not a whole lot of Bloodhound. Got a few of them here and there, but it was mostly 3 Dragons that had picked that up. Everybody's still sticking with the Bangalore, of course, for her ability to cut off sightlines and cut off whole areas of the map on an ult, but we're sticking with more or less the same things in our second round of the day. And now it's time to find out where the ring and the dropship take us, because early contests weren't really a thing, Zephyr.
No, most teams have kind of opted for survivability, especially within these early games, in reference or potentially just to give them the opportunity to play this one out a little bit longer. Throwing your chances of Pro League away at a 50-50, even on one map, is enough to seal or set you within stone here. But hey, we've still got plenty of games, and I'll tell you what, even Stormpoint may mix in some goodies for us when we represent that map in 2 games.
I expect that it will. And Zephyr, as we prepare to commentate over game 2, we've got a little bit of action in the early game, as Tohutona did end up going for the additional points. Alternator in the hands of Marakasi does pick up the singular knock, but with 1 HP, it's not going to last long. Tohutona take a risk and go down very, very early.
Well, it was a major chance for them to catch up or push themselves above the rest in the point standing, but it's one that's going to come back to bite them here now that they are going to lose out an entire game's worth of points. And this is great for the likes of MPC, who are even closer themselves in 9th right now. Now, granted, we're still talking about single point matters here, but it's the difference between Tahu Tohut being a decisive, completely alone, gapping winner to just be, well, MPC.
And now being left alone with essentially 2 POIs worth of loot. Although, let's be honest with ourselves, Monument and Frag are not the greatest places to start. They're certainly going to help when you're able to put those 2 chances of getting nice loot together. Or, if you want to, as NPC, start making your way early into a ring that's really close by.
This one, though, once again, going to be catering towards the western sides of our map here, most either usually ending upwards towards that lava fissure area out towards the west, or sometimes more directly ahead of the Mirage Etoile here. And as a result, we look toward teams, once again, 202, LVH, Stay Healthy, and of course, 40% worse at the very, very southern side.
Villains should be starting to move out of Lava Siphon. Last time, their path took them all the way to the south, but this time, as you say, with the ring so close by, there is a chance that they end up playing through Thermal, maybe running into 40% worse before the boys even have a chance. So many teams have already started evac towering their ways into now Lava Fissure. A pretty uncommon endgame, especially with this ring revealing itself as it has. But, Zephyr, it is also, as uncommon as it is, one of the few places that has buildings you can play in the many final zones that could occur.
Right, and in very few, I would say, though, in comparison to some that we do see here on World's Edge. A team that takes a building, though, that can pay dividends for late game is Deathwish. A roster that we don't make a lot of discussion or fuss about in the kind of points leading up to these preseason qualifiers, or at least our 4th one, but is the next closest out of any other team in the lobby. And after some instance this morning, is now in the position to qualify for Pro League. This is the opportunity to see the remnants of the Odin gamers make their reappearance in Emea.
Could very well usurp the spot of some other teams that started today with quite a few points. OKS not finding enough purchase on the last member. Are going to likely have to let that go, but their own move through this ring should be one that actually makes them a little bit more comfortable. I'm surprised to see them choosing to go through the landslide area instead of moving through the north of Skyhook and then making their way in over by Raven. It is a rotation that should put a lot more KP in their path, but also a lot more risk.
Getting through that landslide area, like you said, can always be difficulties, but seeming that the overlook side of things out here all the way to the east is having more than expected in terms of these teams on their potential rotations. Of course, VJ posturing and the remnants beginning to form out, with everyone now starting to see that there's more than meets the eye. 9 players in this action might be looking for recovery rather than a fight.
Excellence are just right underneath all of this and do not want any part of the action. With triple whites, there is no plan to take this engagement, where Native 8 do feel a little bit more comfortable testing the waters, seeing if they can get an early pick, and BJ, with his back covered, does attempt to grab a little bit more height, ultimately though needing to focus as their crafting rotation is what they're here to focus on. This is not a position that they took in order to find other teams. They want to get the crafting done, grab bats, grab a few shield evos, whatever you need, and then get the heck out.
And ultimately, it's a win. They've managed to do so. The rest of the teams in their presence have completely rotated away, and it is going to be Native that looks all the better for coming out on top of this one. Now, granted, with a balloon nearby and further rotations ahead, it is still difficulties, especially in our earlier discussion regarding that landslide or western areas, but I mean, it's early. There's a lot of realm for spreading things out, and given the potential opportunity to still make heavier rotations, we'll see how it goes.
One of our few Bloodhound squads has Forbidden starting to make their way up into Lava Siphon. They are running into a late rotator. Seems to be going all right for them so far. Zodiac going to swing out along the Catalyst wall, but watches one get dropped. Aku does pop a syringe in order to keep themselves from going down to the ring, but this is where things start to get very dangerous. Even with 2 knocks in your favor, Flesh is just that.
Still, though, just down to Vass here from the likes of Handsome Men as a 2v1 situation is beginning even harder to surmount with those heals coming through. It's likely that after Aku gets this heal and, well, is in that kind of position, we say goodbye to them in 19th.
Handsome Men took a risk, didn't exactly pay off, and their own move through Lava Siphon does end up claiming their lives. The path ahead for Forbidden is still pretty clear, as no teams lie in Harvester or even beyond that on their way to the ring. But once they get there, Villains are still going to be playing on the southeastern side. Alternately, the boys, who are very fond of the landslide rotation, have made it once again. Second game in a row that they take landslide and sit there for a very long time looking for kills to come through.
For LVH, they're sitting so similar up towards the north side here outside of Countdown, taking away some early damage against Goner and Savitar here from Falafel, and we'll see if they continue to pick up that last remaining Nye here as likely escape towards the dead set center of command. But hey, put Vapes on a longbow, make it golden, and I'll tell you what, find a couple cracks.
Golden longbow feels so incredible, but the last couple shots don't exactly hit as they would like. LVH will be playing the one, we'll call it building, in Countdown, with still a whole lot of access points left to it as the zone continues to pull further towards the southeastern side, where No Time for Scrims are left struggling for a position in Monument. They do still have technical high ground advantage.
Well, at least for now, the big difference, though, between their success in these fights that might come to beat them is the fact that they do lack some of those resources. Mod weaponry in hand makes it a little bit easier, but it's that early giveaway to Native that now might come to affect them. Had they taken the fight earlier when things were a bit closer, it could have been easier, but still, like you said, it's a minor height advantage. It's one of the few advantages that they have.
The energy barricade down, Native are disincentivized from pushing up onto the high ground, but they would really like to clear a team away, not have to work on somehow separating themselves from the squad above. No Time for Scrims are going to come under serious pressure as ordinances don't actually get used here, but you're losing space even if it still is on the high ground. Banestow swings for a lot of damage and manages to survive critically. Scary still taking quite a bit. They are going to drop down and try and finish off the last members of this squad. Native have lost one. With Tutu and Odie down, however, it is a numbers advantage for them.
Taking the time to pull some batteries off here will put them in a posturing amount of health as we see revives in a door stuck out on other ends. Looking like the second floor is the place to play as we do take ourselves back towards that zip line. Gotta be careful though. Scary as low as can be. One bad push and a med kit plus not enough heals here. Could be the end of Native if not appropriately handling this.
VJax and Names. Very, very, very close game. Did have to pop syringes immediately, but it works out for Scary, eliminating No Time for Scrims, and credit to Native, who approached that fight really well. It is going to be a struggle to stay alive in this ring, as we said, syringes are super important. As soon as you get picked up off the ground, having to pop one of those in order to stay alive. Even VJax's med kit barely going off in time, but the fight against the ring is going to have to be their main struggle for now. Team Falafel still lie ahead of them, and we've got something else cooking as Villains wait for some poor, unsuspecting fool to walk through the vault.
Why are they I mean, okay, notably, I was about to say, there's no one outside zone. This is likely not to have any impacts, and granted, they are walking away, but could have seen some impacts of Forbidden from their later rotations. The big thing to watch, though, now is, even as good as the Villains have been, they're going to have to stand the true test against the likes of the boys, one of the best fighting squads, the current leader in points here, who have, like we said in the past, nothing to lose.
And Villains immediately run back in. They have been ratted on themselves, and such an easy gatekeep is now available for the boys. 45 seconds means there's no time to go around the rest of the ring, and the boys want to finish off these kills. They don't want to wait and play the patience game. Instead, Bacco gonna peek over the edge of this truck bed. Has lost Clemmy on the way in, but a 30-30 saves the day for them. The boys, with no shields left, have one member in their faces, and Villains go down. The rotations in from Native 8 still happening right next door. Scary is right above all this. Forbidden starting to make their way in from the south, have not chosen to go through the boys. 13 seconds left. Native are going to have one terrifying roster coming out behind them.
With no eyes ahead set here, they'll take the time to get at least the med kits off for their final or maybe last appearances. But the big thing to point out after that wipe is now officially Finals Finders and 40% Worst are the two most leading point squads coming outside or into our game 2. With good positioning, good KP, we might see a definite or dominant leader. This is huge though, attempting to try to go for the revive even with the boys. Alongside
and
that,
Stone closing in. This is really dangerous for Native. And normally I think the boys would push this, but they've got another squad to deal with. Bloodhound scan comes out. Babylon's perfectly predicting the swing. Does still get shredded, but Conduit keeps them alive. Bacco does end up falling, however, and it's left in the hands of Clemmy to make it into the zone. Something that, especially after this shell shock, is difficult, if not impossible, to do. The finish comes in. The boys go out, and Native, who stuck the res earlier, are still alive.
on the other side, they will set themselves up with the minor cover that exists here, and Forbidden are slowly piecing themselves back together, and if I'm correct, looking to be a direct 2v2 situation. Aku, no white heals to go, now going to have to fight this one out with just 150 total available health.
I still don't know which side of this I prefer, because you know that with coming in with 2 syringes and 2 cells, that Native aren't feeling too happy about this situation either, but Forbidden are going to dip back into the zone, grab a few meds and resources where they can, because ultimately, Native still lie in their path and are just one step in what's going to be a very difficult journey. This ring continuing to pull into Countdown, forcing a lot of rotations from Lava Fisher, where we saw teams itemize into earlier.
Woo! I'll tell you what, even if you make your way, though, into Fissure, look at who are the gatekeepers here. Deathwish followed by 202, followed by 40% Worse. Now, 40%, the only roster who isn't set as a full 3-man. Instead, Shiv taking an incredibly wide alternative angle here to try to punish out maybe these further rotations. Obviously, is on that Bangalore, so can cater to the smokes at any given point to pull this one back in a way, but that's not a lot of cover, and not a lot of space.
Finals Finders defend their home in Lava Fisher, but they're going to need to make their move out as the zone has started closing. They don't have time to finish off this fight. Do they have time to take a risk on high ground and exit this way? That seems to be the plan. One smoke left for Fauda. It's going to be used very early to make their way into the center. Just as the other comes off cooldown, it gives them no breathing room at all. Native go down. Excellence go down. Forbidden fall on the ring close as well. Claimed by 40% Worse.
And sadly for Finals Finders, they themselves are still looking for a position ahead, one heavily held by the remnants of these teams. It is a single veil that gives them their performance to stay alive, and Infuta going to be taking it down to the bottom, the low ground, where maybe just a small whisper, a small ratting will keep them alive. But look at 202 climbing up, walking into 40% space.
40% won't have much to work with for long. With 2 down, it's just Zerifer left, even in this truck bed. A cute spot, but not one that should keep them alive for long. We'll see whether the fight continues around them as OKS are starting to come into third party this, perhaps giving Zerifer the chance to rat things out for good and for a few placement points. Miscam gonna slide up into their faces, get taken down almost immediately, and Rakafaka on 25 HP is going to have a difficult time clutching this up.
From one rat to another here, 202 will try and down shield in the name of Aussie Owl, makes its way back. And for Rakafaka, the minute a peek occurs on the other side, instantly starts to take damage. For now, going to have to persist as low and as slow as they can as Death Wish now slides in as that fourth party here begins with, while yes, their own damage, but taking just as much in return.
Talk is still on the low ground as well. Final Spiders go down, and then 202 follows, making it all the way into 8th. Deathwish now having lost one in a two-way battle are gonna get swung on, and the fight is never ending as OKS want to claim these kills. Their own journey does take out Deathwish, but now needs to start moving them into Countdown because the ring has started closing and we still have not stopped fighting. We still haven't even stopped chasing as Odyssey are right behind OKS.
They've got to make a choice here, whether it's the fight ahead or directly in the face of the team set within Countdown. Pinhu, without the slow on their back, now has the opportunity to peek this other side, but you have to be so careful. We know for a fact that there is likely a team in that window, and now we know that we've got squads coming from the Lava Fisher side. Perfectly timed pylon to give them their defense, but it needs to be an even better fight here without Chico down, with Pinhu and Ludwig pushing. They're able to get the wipe, but Stay Healthy are here for the cleanup.
It is probably the 6th party at this point, and Stay Healthy should be the last, the only surviving squad to have come from Lava Fisher and make it into this zone. They are now one of 4 teams left: NPC, LVH, Wanted, and Stay Healthy on the low ground. Arguably the most difficult position, but they have the benefit of it being the most undesirable one as well.
Right now, NPC, I would say, I mean, potentially, yes, Stay Healthy is undesirable, but I would not want where NPC currently are stuck literally within a corner. LVH are looking for the full send. Robin already down and out. Leia will try for the Radiant transfer and will find.
Oh my god! Oh my god! That was the. No. That R99 spray, nothing to do with it. Those Peacekeeper shots were the most devastating thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It's almost individually responsible for moving us down to just the 2 squads left. And now Stay Healthy's position does start to look a whole lot harder, even with the smokes that they've used up. Their previous prayer of hoping that 2 teams would fight each other got shut down by the exact Peacekeeper we're thinking of.
Oh. Wanted, who have been far and few between in terms of recent fights here, are more than happy now to take advantage of the height they posture with now. Love this opposite angle from Mumet, but it will be found with a black hole in response. Now completely separated out as a solo member. This is the advantage Stay Healthy look for, but the height in return is oh so difficult. A perfect dark veil on the other side. Angles to push back finds Thawne as well. Now a single knockdown shield and a dream here, and a 2v1 here.
And with no shield swaps on the other side, no way to push through this cat wall either. There's going to be a few seconds until this one drops, likely falling soon, but up to the skies. Gravity Lift is going to take the last member, and this will be it. Wanted will claim the win. Stay Healthy fought well, but who could have predicted that? Who can emotionally recover from that game even?
I just want to, like, that's exactly how it feels here. We went from dominant rosters from 202 to 40% worse to the likes of Stay Healthy, even in LVH, right? Making their own extreme swings. But ultimately, it didn't matter. In so many ways, the KP that so many teams were looking to pick up here doesn't come through, right? They don't get the opportunity to actually piece that together, right? Because third party into 4th, into 5th, into 6th, it's very likely that when we look at the kills in this solo game, you're only taking away 3 to 6 maybe at maximum.
That's very true. That's very true. Where this game did provide in terms of showmanship at the end, it may not have been everybody's dream standings booster. Let's actually take a look at the standings just to see how we're sitting after 2 games now, because 40% worse, Wow, still in the lead, but with finals finders still tied with them. Honestly, Zephyr, not much has changed.
This is exactly what I was trying to express here. When everyone's a winner in their own individual super fights that immediately get wiped out here, no one really takes off on the leaderboard. It's a huge catch-up for the villains in Wanted, though, and even a tie-in towards NPC, who jumped from 7th all the way to 5th here. But ultimately, hands are tied still on the likes of World's Edge. There is still a world of performance that needs to be had here for any one of these rosters.
There very much is. Unfortunately, Zephyr, there's 4 games left to do it. One more on World's Edge, however, when we come back. I'll be honest with you, Zephyr. I'm still thinking about Flinzon's PK shots. However, we do have to get on with our day, and that means that we do have the privilege of seeing who's getting ever closer to Pro League as we move forward through the day. As you noted, and we'll bring up the standings one more time so that those who are new can just check them out before we move into the next game. We're not actually getting that much closer to determining the actual leader in this lobby, as last game was so chaotic that not many teams got to put up a big amount of points.
No, it is a quote-unquote grand reset for so many of our rosters out there. We take the bottom of the board and elevate a majority of the teams closer to that 9-point mark, and for some of those who are maybe falling a hair's breadth behind in terms of the single digits, Wanted, NPCs here, even Odysseys and OKS, they all managed to kind of climb up in that last game and have maybe more a reliably fighting chance here for their final game on World's Edge.
And it's important that you illustrate that, because the fact that we got one of these reset games, as you called it, on World's Edge means that if you are a team that does rely a little bit more on the clean macro and easy zone pulls or zone play that World's Edge should be giving you statistically, this is a big wake-up call. Now you've got to think about adjusting to Storm Point, or rather, you should be thinking about that in about 25 minutes. Right now, get your head in the game. But it's getting very close, and with only one game left to determine really whether you're in Pro League or not, at least for World's Edge, this is going to be difficult for teams that did want to play a little more conservatively coming into today.
Now, I want to talk about this because there's definitely some 40% fans out there. Yes, they're in the lead right now, but they need to maintain it here. But something that I am beginning to notice that should give you a sliver of hope is with some of those shots potentially shifting, with the boys maybe on their way to catch up alongside Stay Healthy, the opportunity for Deathwish versus 40% Worse to come into the fray of how those points fall out is ever more present. Notice, 40% in first. Deathwish, who, even though they are slightly above them in the current standings, are at 17th. I don't need to tell most people to know that that math alone right there is a massive advantage for the likes of 40% Worse.
Very much so. This is, I think, probably the day that most people, as you said, since they have a lot of fans in the audience, were hoping for. There are going to be some Deathwish fans, however, that do want this contest to get a little bit closer. It will require quite a bit, though, because 40% Worse have been playing really well, even in last game that, as we said, did claim a lot of lives, even on the rotation in. 40% Worse were playing really clean Apex Legends, making their way in from the south side of zone. Thermal has given them a lot of room to make slow moves into the ring and to play around the edge of it while still being able to access parts of the map that nobody else is in, mainly because the zones are pulling over towards the west and they're already there, so many teams pile up in the eastern side of these rings.
Well, for most of our teams here, they might be hoping for a pile like that or something that gives them their advantage, but ultimately, we hope we don't go towards the west. We've paid our visits, we've made our way towards Countdown and Skyhook, and of course Fissure, all the same, but it's time to shift things up.
This is not the last movie of Lord of the Rings. That joke was for my father, and my father only. So Joaquin, if you're out there, that was for you.
All right. Joaquin, congratulations.
All right. Our final game on World's Edge has already dropped everyone off. We do have early fights once more as Juicy goes down. Really nice movement from Tohu Tonan. Good damn. But the fight over at Dome, we know who this is.
Right.
It's going to be Tohu Tonut hoping to eliminate 3 dragons early, and 3 dragons who have played today out as a duo. Juso does go low, but this is still a big numbers advantage.
At this point here, it's Tohu Tonut is actually making a very smart play. They always know they'll be at a numbers advantage if they slow play this out, and finding that first elimination pretty much guarantees that if they handle this well, play appropriately, it is a extra 2 KP per game here if they can source out this rotation, this POI, and this drop.
The damn slides on through. Tohu Tonut don't want to keep pushing their luck, however, especially knowing there's a PK on the other side of this. Full on rushing it could be really embarrassing. So they are going to play this slow, play it at range.
Oh, geez.
And hopefully pick up the last kill. You did mention it, however, that we weren't going to be going up towards the northwest side of the map again. This time, we are we're going southwest. So 40% Worse, very different game, and arguably the biggest challenge that'll be thrown at them throughout all of their games on World's Edge today.
Well, we'll see how they make their rotations instead now for the Handsome Men. They themselves in fights of their own. Behind the door, a white shield to be had. Calamitous finally being knocked as Odie turns right round and spies that one out. Vervass up, taking towards this height. A grab lift will be a nice reset, but ultimately, with doors ahead and potential issues regarding revives, this could get very bad for Handsome.
It's a nice way to be able to drop down as well. Has a knockdown shield ready, even if it is only a white one. They're going to try and take this fight with purple shields. Now having lost all of them, no gravity lift to the escape either, and Handsome Men go down. No time for scrims. Clearly have time for the contest. And end up winning it, and winning all of Big Mod with it.
Well, for the likes of Handsome Men, that's going to put them back on the drawing board, still sitting single digits for their welcoming into the likes of Storm Point. For the boys, they seem to have already been getting aggressive. In some kind of fight, some kind of action, it's from one kill to the next, and for the boys, while they may take damage back, they're still looking here. Granted, with heals and what looks to be more of a rotation, I don't know if they're actually going to try to finish off the likes of Harvester.
This is another really weird place for the boys to play, as they are in fact going to drop back down in a bit of an unexpected move. Their POI being one that a lot of people will rotate through in order to make it into thermal in the surrounding area makes this really difficult. We do have another fight kicking off as Stay Healthy go up against villains and go down against villains.
For Masuko, immediately taking to the high hills. Any chance of surviving and making it to this endgame. Meanwhile, for the likes of villains, far from over, a massive energy barricade will punish DipQ out, and none other than Deathwish from behind will seal their fate, seal their deal, drop once more, and, well, leave just but Horizon now.
That was a really nice push from Deathwish, and to open things up with the energy barricade like that just made sure there was no other options. We've even got the same thing happening one more time as the boys now want to whip the third party, and they find Genos just as quickly, if not faster. Babylon's is not chill at all.
I hesitate to expressively call that a fight, but when you are the third of fourth parties here, it makes it difficult. And with turnaround ahead, with a minor scan, the boys were immediately ready to potentially pull things off here. So, a reminder to fans out there, for your 40% lovers, seeing Deathwish go down that early with only a handful of KP is still a major potential win here if one of our top 5 walks out with a win today. If potentially a team like 202 win today's match.
Cooking that up as we speak, having taken the place of the boys previously. Energy barricade stalls any push in any direction over here, but holding out towards the top end, it's going to be up against 40% worse, who have rotated out of thermal and up towards the north, not expecting that the zone pulls further towards their POI.
Now, if
or maybe looking for more KP.
I'm interested. That was a conduit in play. Minor ultimate. Okay, never mind. From behind, we'll see. Same to be said for the boys rotating up on this one here. And while they might try to breach this choke, I like the fact that they hesitate and treat it in kind with the respect that they do dare always observe. But granted, knowing that they're in comfortable position, they say, why not? Harvester's got some teams. We've got the ability to fight things out. And arguably, most rosters who they are more confident in fighting have not made the full rotation to zone here. An odd drop, but hey, Babylon move.
Babylon's is terrifying me right now with the early gravity lift right after that previous fight, and just the preparation to throw out a black hole as they did. Insta Arcstar goes out, and Babylon swings the solo member in the building. Doesn't deal a whole lot of damage, but it's the confidence that's getting me. Out goes the black hole. Another Arcstar to follow this up, and Babylon's, he just keeps swinging.
And now, notably, it is a major separation for this team at hand. Bako will be picked up in the return from those shadows, are dealing the damage here. Is this recognized as MPC? Babylon caught out as one is picked up. Make it 2 here. Now a 2v1 situation with a full shield swap for Clemmy. Takes it to the 1v1 here. A knockdown shield ahead with an energy barricade coming out, though, makes it oh so difficult to survive.
So much space has been bought off of that, and the boys play Apex Legends like it's baseball, just constantly swinging. The villains move in once more. This is the last member of the villains, the one that managed to escape earlier after the culling that happened by the fence line. Pick up on the ground would make this recovery all the more difficult for the boys, but far from impossible, as Quick shield swap comes in. I think the boys haven't been able to make actually any recovery yet. Clemmy still has a health advantage, but this is not looking good.
A nice scan coming through there will give away Clemmy's position, which ultimately would likely be the full push here from the remnants of the villains. Has to be super careful about pulling this one off. Maybe looking to just bait things out. Horizon will look over on the edge, has perfect angles here, but has been heard out.
Oh, he knows. Oh, 172, that's a push. Quick shield swap, I believe, came out, and back to purpose once again. Kinbar almost goes down, but the 30-30 hip fire, even with the nerf Zephyr, makes it happen. Nice play from the solo remaining member of Villains to not only keep them in the game, but gather even more KP.
Shocking the boys never pull off a revive there, especially given how paced Horizon was to that play. But things to note is the fact that they still walk away from that game with at least at minimum 6 KP. That's enough that keeps them at least competitive in their journey.
The difficult part of it is going to be that no placement points came with that, being our squad in 16th to go out. It has been, for all of the fighting that we've seen so far, a game that hasn't gone quite fast enough to make you feel comfortable with leaving us before round 2's close.
Now for Tohu Tonhut, they are, I would say, a little bit more comfortable with the situations ahead here in this current fight. Already knocking out, there you go, 2. They'll find the remnants of silence are wiped by the likes of Hukubamba. Hukubamba, I assume. Bama?
Sorry, I am totally floored by the fact that you read that as silence, and I read it as excellence. I'm gonna go figure that out.
I mean, how do you spell excellence and how do you spell silence?
No, I'm not disagreeing. I don't disagree. I don't disagree with you.
Okay.
I think,
All right.
yeah.
All right.
I think they're both valid interpretations. That would be my argument.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Chat,
Yeah.
D says that
Yeah.
this is a valid interpretation. Run him down, please,
Yeah,
if you would.
we need votes in the chat. I'm so confident that I do want the chat to get involved. Mesuko, however, probably not nearly as confident. Watching everybody go by, the last member of Stay Healthy, playing things close to the chest, and unfortunately, we'll have to move along with everyone else. This is one of those choke points that we talked about earlier that was pseudo-created in Skyhook, and that was definitely created last game towards the south end of Countdown, where now the southeastern side of this ring is about to become a bloodbath.
I like the fact that right there you can see it on the screen, 40% worse, knowing this issue, take to the balloon to remove themselves from the equation and present directly in thermal. This will be an issue later, though, when they are forced to rotate upwards towards that height on the opposite side of that fissure itself, and as a result, might face their difficulties. Instead, I look towards teams like LVH and 202 who hold happy positions towards the northeastern side of our further zone.
And this northeastern side that you talk about was something that was also prioritized by 40% worse earlier. They may not be there now, but the very fact that teams that landed in thermal and had first pick of the zone started moving towards the northeast says some pretty critical things about where this zone is going to go. Because if there's anybody that you expect to know these zone endings, it is the teams that actually land there. No time for scrims. May not even make it, however, as taking a bit of an unsafe heal. Will lose 1. 2-2 fires back. Doesn't find the trade, however. Only has so much left as Radiant transfers on cooldown. And that means no sustain and no more Apex Legends. Game 3 of World's Edge is finished for no time for scrims. It's OKS that keep their legacy moving, this time through the northeastern side of the ring.
Hopefully to find themselves a happy position. Now we, though, begin to see major southeastern rotations, double Dark Veils down here on both sides. As look at that, trying to foot their way in. A lot of teams are catering, though, to the train line below. It's not as bad as it looks like here. Native are actually alone from this position with a team that mirrors them in that position there. They do have someone on their left-hand side as this wall comes down. Might have to fight things out. Oh!
Right behind them, OKS have just dropped in. Scary is going to throw out the black hole to try and stop them, but there's not a whole lot that you can do here. A lot of damage has already been taken by the zone, and OKS evaporate. I think that's the best way we can put it.
It's a great position from Scary that comes back to benefit this roster, but now with the other teams presenting where we most notably saw them here, they've got to find recovery for 202. They make an aggressive move to play off the other side, but Forbidden from below now gets involved here with the coup on that height, forced to drop back down. It's a great rolling thunder that pushes them back, but ultimately 202 with nowhere to go. A recovering team on the opposite side are likely at their last wits here. Raka Faka, the one who's pulled off miracles before, pulls off the miracle of a medkit.
We've still got teams behind them, however. We know Tohu Tona just took the fight up against the last bit of OKS. And 202 will start pushing back towards the last remaining members of that squad. Caught between what looks like a rock and a hard place. Is really between a trio and just a duo, but 202 don't have that information.
Meanwhile, this is a position that they gave up. Right? Being in those buildings previously, a dominant spot for the endgame. Thought they could clean things off of the east, but instead were wrapped and taken away here. Even if they are successful in wiping, defending, and making something happen within the next 10 seconds, what used to be their position is no longer available. For now, an evac tower ahead, and while they may try and punish potentially this last type of KP, could be their final impact on this game.
That's one drop. Tohu Tona now operating as a solo. Big deal for them and no way to recover it. 202 still have to move in. The last member of Tohu Tona makes their way to the center of zone, but they're not the only ones. Everybody in the center of Thermal Station will have to make their way out, and 40% worse are included in that, our current lobby leaders.
Now from below 202 with one smoke ahead here are dancing between bullets, putting on a show as instead, Chico and Ludwig may be the distracting entity, but Forbidden hasn't forgotten through and through. They remember the team that presented here is left up to Ozzy Owl to find the minor cover that may, but from ahead, they'll inevitably face their difficulties.
Gets swung back on by Odyssey, but Odyssey give up a lot on that as well. They swing right into Forbidden sightlines and have essentially doomed themselves. Full send finishes them off. Odyssey are down and out, and it's only really Forbidden that get to claim any part of this city. A solo from Tohu Tona is there. LVH are making their way in from the north. We talked about this already. The exodus from Thermal, it is coming. 40% worse. Play on the low ground. Finals Finders right alongside them. This is, on that half at least, basically just a rematch of our Skyhook zone.
At least for now here, 40% worse in Finals Finders are in a punished situation, but granted, as LVH loses a lot of the space and freedom to extend past this barrier here, they might not be able to. But with that damage found and the information from Finals, being that it will be the push that results in very likely the end of both of these rosters here. Zerfer down, Mandy and Shiv make it, potentially the namesake himself, also eliminated. It's up to Mandy.
With 1 HP, I hesitate to even call this a dream. It's more of a impending sense of doom. 40% worse. Do fall. The next round starting to close in now as Finals Finders will make their way up. LVH, who was previously keeping both teams from being able to move up reliably, very distracted for the moment. They're going to need Jay Hanzo to pay attention to the low ground lest this third party come in. Although, thinking about it now critically from LVH's perspective, they may very well want Finals Finders to come up since it would be right at the back of Forbidden, who they're currently taking a fight with. This is kicked off so early. Finals Finders have to hear this. This is LVH and Forbidden essentially gift wrapping them the game.
Coming in here now from above, like you said, the perfect of all situations for the likes of Final Finders. Forbidden will be full wiped down to just a single member. LVH, a duo at the hands of our final zone. Make it a solo. And for Finals Finders, like you said, it must be Christmas early here.
It's two solos. There's literally nothing they can do. Finals Finders come all the way back and finish off the third game on World's Edge after almost clinching the victory in round one. Great finish for them, and I mean, where there's a throw, there's a catch. Both teams on high ground fight. Finals finders know it's their time. It's as simple as that.
Well, like you said, a repeat from our original Skyhook Game 1 here, as Final Finders had very minorly fell, quote-unquote, behind, I say, as they just simply tied for first. This is now the perfect opportunity for them, of all teams, making their appearance here in PSQ4 to potentially lead.
Now, I want to look at the standings because the fact that finals finders are, I imagine, currently in the lead should make this an even scarier race, not just for them, but for the teams that came into today having, and I'm putting this in air quotes, already qualified.
Wow.
Finals finders can change that, so let's take a look at the standings.
Right off the bat with their win, they will now be dominantly in the lead. From 22 all the way to 40, an 18-point game puts Final Finders in the lead here, thus behind them 40% worse, who even still a difficult ending for them in Thermal. They walk away at least into second there, and even for LVH, they themselves now catching up at 23.
3 games left to play, and probably around 3 minutes until the next game starts. So how about this? We'll take a break, we'll grab some water. This is halftime, and we'll come back with Stormpoint. Well, behind the scenes, Zephyr and I debate on the definition of cognition. We're about to jump to game number 4. Stormpoint is upon us. Let's go ahead and bring up the scoreboards before we jump into it, because, well, we've talked about the first couple of squads. Well, I want to touch back on the implications that we mentioned throughout the earlier parts of today, with very few teams coming into today feeling comfortable in the points. The boys, one of them, 202. Stay healthy, LVH, and 3 Dragons. 3 Dragons are currently at the very bottom end of our leaderboards, and still with a lot of questions around their roster viability. Now, we find Finals Fighters 40% worse and Villains in our top 3, all of whom could just win and qual.
Right. This is so most notably with the boys, still in the running for qualification no matter what here, and with Three Dragons likely completely out. It currently is set that the boys 202 Stay Healthy and LVH are going to be those points-based winners for Pro League. The only thing, though, that does change that is if sneaking up here in 4th, LVH, or potentially 8th down there with the boys, one of these two rosters walks away with the win. If one of them, or even potentially 202 in 14th, and potentially all the way down there as well, Stay Healthy in 13th, then that opens up one additional slot for either Death Wish or 40% worse. Now, granted, this is all hinging on the wonderful, exasperated breadth of none of these teams winning in their own right, but granted, people are to calculate. Zephyr is here to try to answer some of those questions.
So let me rephrase what you're saying just to make sure that first of all it's clear for me, and then also hopefully that it's clear for other people. And what you're saying is that because we have 4 teams that are basically going to make it, the boys 202, Stay Healthy, and LVH, they're feeling comfortable, they have a lot of points. If one of them wins, it opens up another spot via points for, correct, as you say, 40% worse or Death Wish.
So, if anybody else wins, we already know our top 4 points-based winners, but if one of them come out on top, like you said, it opens the door to potentially 2. I'll say Death Wish and 40% worse. There's plenty of other mathematics, but those are the closest.
Okay, well, I mean, 40% worse are looking really good today. However, Death Wish did move up in the standings since the last time we talked about them, and we're just switching maps, which hopefully gives them a bit of a different angle to approach these games from. Right now sitting in 16th with 9 points. The jump up to 30 actually isn't that far in 3 games, but it will rely on 40% worse doing... Would they have to do 40% worse? I think they'd have to do 50% worse, but it's pretty close.
Well, no controllers in hand. We'll see how it goes here for the likes of them. The big thing I'm looking at, though, is the change-up regarding some of these rosters, most notably, for some reason, already right off the bat, Silence Esports is in the hands of 2 pieces of Meat Mountain, sadly. Oh, it's all Meat Mountain! It's all Meat Mountain!
Zephyr, we saw 300 damage in maybe 2 seconds out of a Peacekeeper, and the most excited you've gotten today is seeing Newcastle locked in to complete Meat Mountain? For shame! For shame!
I'm sorry. You just don't get to run Meat Mountain and not get a lot of that meaty Zephyr love here. I don't prey upon their success. I don't know if there will be any success. All I know is that is as good as it gets for ALGS. And most notably, the votes are in, by the way. But first, a contest.
Yeah, I noticed that. I did see that. Trial's still out, or rather jury's still out for what happens in Mill. Native seem to be coming on top of it, however, with Remix down. The Mozambique slays early game. Still laying out the 45 damage at a distance. Shield swap has come in, leaving you with much less HP, but the turnaround is big. VJX still needs to clutch this up. Needs to hit a reload as well. Another shield swap has come in, and Native get danced on by the handsome men.
From literally a handful of missing to the end of this roster, handsome men will be punished just as quickly here. A mutually assured destruction as none other than LVH ride up to seal the deal here. Now that's big for LVH, 4th place right now and a guaranteed at least singular KP.
And all of the loot that comes with Mill as well. There's a reason why so many people wanted to fight over it. An excellent POI to start with, and we'll see how far it can take them, as we do appear to be going a little further north for this ring. 40% worse started making their way up with not a whole lot of shielding, healing, nothing, and they're starting to get sidetracked into an engagement.
A major rotation from Wanted down from the hillside, and granted, I can't spy out who might be the remnants of Launchpad there, but still a big, even wider rotation from 40% as Manny and Zerafer are looking for an entrance maybe back towards the original POIs of this devastated coast or potentially something else. It doesn't change the fact, though, that they have one of the hardest rotations out and away here as we're likely to cater towards the hard northwestern side of the trenches.
I This would be less weird from 40% worse if there was a crafter there, but because there isn't, I can only imagine that they're trying to move out and up through spiders towards Stormcatcher. Because otherwise it's just a
No.
very very awkward situation. Time will tell, as you say. NPC will start approaching from Echo HQ, actually likely taking a similar path as going through Pylon and into villains is going to be very difficult. Villains who have gotten away with just highway robbery on POIs, by the way. Lava Siphon and Pylon?
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, a dominant roster with a lot of extensive history. I mean, they don't just do it randomly. They are easily one of the
Mhm.
best teams in terms of the individual histories and performance behind them. For now, though, we'll tune back on over to Stay Healthy, a team that hasn't had their best start today on World's Edge, and while they've had some of their few shining moments, missing out on a win and hey, picking up this KP could be their return.
Going 1-for-1 there, though, does not look good. Thon and Mexico are going to round up. They do get shot in the back just a little bit. Crack going to come in and a drop very late. The Hipfire Sentinel does look good for Thon, but right into the arms of a third party does not. And that third party should be finishing off the kills right above as well. Mutually assured destruction as everybody is rotating towards this side of the map. And Odyssey are not going to give Deathwish a clear way out.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's at least the 2 KP likely for the hats of Stay Healthy, but Deathwish with this final pickup will send, like you said, both of these rosters out and will continue to hopefully bolster themselves now on that leaderboard. We talk about that potential race in the future if all comes together. And for the likes of them, they need to be catching up. Being so far behind, 40% worse, is a huge issue if it comes down to the mathematics.
Deathwish continuing to move now into the bunkers. Could stay here for the late game. Are going to pick up the last kill on what I believe to be, there we go, last member of Fluffle. And likely start to bunker down into a good position. They making their way all the way here was not accidental and it was not greed. When you move this far towards North Pad, you plan to stay.
For Tohu Tonta, they are going to be the ones dominantly in the hands of these late game positions towards North Pad. For Finals Finders, our leading roster, they've managed to make it to the placement territory, but with knocks like this, they've got to be so careful. They've just begun to claim what could be their Pro League spot. They can't let Forbidden take that away.
Forbidden have already expended 2 ults in order to make this fight happen. A nice nade through the top clears the way for Falcons and does a whole lot of damage along with the R99 that he's got. Swings down onto the bottom floor, and Falcons is everywhere. This should be the kills easily going the way of Forbidden. The fact that it's actually taken this long to wipe out Finals Finders and they almost lose Falcons on the way, it's just a testament to the team that they were taking out. Finals Finders really put up a big fight, but there was no way out.
A huge issue for them in their last remnants, and will now be for the rest of the teams in this lobby who have gotten that notification, the perfect opportunity for success. And even for 40% worse, it gets better. Deathwish on their rotation to play more directly in the heat and center of that zone faces difficulties, and they themselves get wiped out as well. Now, granted, with a little bit more extra KP on their belt, they're looking maybe a tail's breadth better on the overall standings, but once again, this is the perfect opportunity for 40% worse. I feel like a fanboy. I feel like there's bias, but the stories themselves are defining how they are.
It's just, they've looked really good. They've played with a lot of passion. And as you talked about, there's so much goodwill built up towards these players throughout the history of Apex Legends. 40% worse are making good on that right now as they rotate through and into Lagoon, a largely empty area, as is the entirety of the eastern side of the map. Wanted a little bit further north, but for the most part, I hesitate to even say we have crowding over by North Pad. We've just dropped a lot of squads so far, and everyone else is so spread out.
Easily one of the quickest games that we have seen in today's Embers. Stormpoint bringing a whole slew of aggression regarding the pace of play and even some contests that now make themselves more apparent here. Things that I'll be watching out for, though, as we start to look at that final zone is look at LVH's position out there towards the west and what will likely be their contest against the villains here, making a wide sweeping rotation around. This is something that could pay in effect to them, a team so close to potentially walking into winning spots as well.
Good shots to take out Jay Hanzo. The 3-2-1 really working for the villains, who do get even more aggressive immediately following. Rev ult out means that there's no way to pick Jay Hanzo back up. Liffin heads to the hills. 1 KP secured. But King is extending pretty darn far. If he wants to go for this, does have eyes on both remaining members. Gonna give it up. Fair enough. I honestly didn't think they would chase that far, but it has gotten villains a better spot in zone, as just having access to these bunkers is really big for them, and it, of course, has kept them safe from the ring at their backs for at least the next couple of minutes. The potential for a third party now emerging as King drops down into the bunkers proper. Doesn't have ultimate just yet, but with Diff Q right next door, taking a 2v3 is doable.
Could potentially go for this push, but you have to be super respectful because at the end of the day, there's still a lot of teams that haven't made their impacts or rotations in and could always be starting to pressure from checkpoint side. And for villains, they've lost out a lot of their utility on their initial fight in this equation here. The time to follow up has long since passed, and for the likes of the villains, the time now is to sit and wait. Get some of those cooldowns back up, secure the resources, and then if you're looking for that further fight, take it when it is more imperative. Take it when you are necessary in terms of rotating for that zone, because at least right now, it's too much of a potential risk.
Vapes is sitting there in the distance going, what if you took it now, chicken? What if, what if you just walked up to us right into this hemlock, eh? Villains aren't taking the bait, but Vapes is doing their best. His ultimate cooldowns start to tick on over. Very close to where King will feel comfortable recommitting, especially with the Bloodhound scan, to reveal this is in fact the duo they suspected. Villains are having trouble with the actual execution on the push, but it's coming. It's a matter of time.
This is something that can come back to bite them, is being a little bit more, we'll say, struggling with this incursion is going to come back and kind of diminish a lot of the resources that they have to work with when they have to get to a more notable circle. Noticeably, both the villains and LVH aren't in round 4 yet. Neither have position, and in fact, there is a team ahead that holds that next major octagon, right? And if you are so deeply in depth impacting this next position ahead, I mean, there's no hope for you to clean up the following team afterwards.
It's not even like OKS have been playing poorly today either. OKS have played very, very well despite the way that they died in last game, having to make a late rotate. The fact that they're in zone now does put them in a much better position, especially with the small amount of high ground they have, to put up a good defense and to take out the 2 squads, as you're alluding to. We do still have time on the next ring close for all 3 squads involved to make moves and, of course, mistakes during the next couple of minutes. But as we spoke of earlier, the amount of squads that have died in this early game and the ones that it looks like we may be dropping now is giving so much more room for error than is typical in a game of Apex Legends.
Now, speaking of error, NPCs will find they themselves in 1-4 now. 202 will be the first to find this initial knock against Robin, and even with the help now of Wanton on their side, this will push them back deeper into the heart of that zone, which becomes a real punishing effect here, given that we're sitting at zone 3 and further. For 202, it's big moves, but for
here they come.
You gotta be careful.
40% worse. Insta Horizon ult should buy them a lot more, not just room, but the ability to shepherd this team together. The remaining members of 202 being currently melted by the thermite. Zerafer does need to land one more shot. It'll happen with 202 going down. Shield swap barely saves their life as Shiv gets picked back up, but 40% worse. Now on the defensive side of things, have a smoke and not too much more between them and Wanted.
For Wanted, this push here is initiated by the likes of at least a Thermite. A Dark Veil down, though, is a bit of protection for what looks to be the full runaway here from 40% worse. And Wanted, they don't want the KP. They instead say, we've got 10 seconds till zone. A further chase on 40% worse is something that will likely net us and them both an elimination here. And that's why you see that evac tower come out and what will likely be a hopeful position amongst the rest of these 9 ahead.
Are they able to make it through this gap? I think they are. Wanted do almost entirely make it through the gap. They are going to have to go back for one, but their story likely going to continue over the next couple of minutes, whereas this is a little bit less certain. Forbidden having to play in not a good spot in checkpoint. Are going to take to the inside of this building, try and hold it down even with a whole squad on top of it.
Ultimately, it's a position that can breed success, especially with those from the shadows. I love this move. Falcons going to be one that comes not just with the first elimination, but a return as well. At least, though, notably, they get the full wipe on Tutu, and with the return of Falcons back down to the second floor, this makes it a guaranteed 3v2.
Falcons res, not a gold one, but still going to be plenty good with an Arc Star onto the ceiling. Makes for an easy push, and Forbidden are playing this quite well, but they have lost track of the fight for a moment. Without the Bloodhound scans to follow them up, no time for scrims do go down. Zodiac going to be picked up as another member gets grabbed. And we've got the continual fight that we talked of earlier happening with villains on the southern side of this ring. Crack and elimination on that full squad, with LVH, who was right next to them, having rotated in ahead, and OKS, the one standing now in the way of 40% worse, who are just a duo.
Now, notably, it looks like that on this wide sweeping rotation, Shiv pays the price at what I believe was a piece or present of some of these other rosters. Something that they will have to deal with is the fact that Forbidden, after their major wipes from above, will now get down and dirty into the depths of these trenches, pushing at least 40% worse further. Notably, though, if we're talking about available space to play here, they have found themselves a minor home. It's just worrying regarding most of these Eastern teams who will likely try to be playing for the exact same trench line.
Monday's playing really well just to put out damage onto Forbidden. This isn't something that is going to completely change the game in terms of instant KP for 40% worse, but showing presence in these tunnels has pushed Forbidden off to the other side. Unfortunately, they've run into OKS, which forces, again, Forbidden back to the low ground. With the boys now starting to come in, there's going to be a whole nother wrench thrown into this, and they want to land directly on top of where 40% worse just were.
And this is going to be something that pushes 40% worse head into the north, but it's a major distraction for them that comes at the price of boys now putting their own shots back, with Forbidden pinching from the other side. This could be a dangerous rotation that comes at the cost of the entirety of the boys roster. Babylon down, and now Faco taking to the other trench line here will barely find the battery before taking the heat.
Another kill goes to Forbidden, and it's revealed that there's now a Kraber in play, but in the hands of a solo, it's going to be difficult to make that work. Meat Mountain rains down a defensive bombardment, and the boys are left with just one member who's coming back to claim some KP. Moving in over the top, hits a 140, but just onto a knockdown shield, leaving Forbidden in the dust as they are destroyed. Faco, with a very little bit of cover, should be able to pull off the shield. Bat doesn't get spotted by the subsequent rotation, and instead drops down into the bunkers, somehow alive.
Literally with just a sliver of health there, will look for returns. Meanwhile, for Silence, as much as I love the Meat Mountain, we never truly got to see them shine on their rotation or their survival. Instead, it's a full wipe. Meanwhile, now Wanted, with literally but a corner to play with here, are stuck with nowhere to go. I was about to say, it's not the remnants of the boys, it's Odyssey who climbs their way out from this tunnel and tries to punish deep on the edge of zone.
And I know this is a little bit tangential, but Falco just got a Kraber knock in the kill feed as well, which is honestly going to be a real thorn in the side of Wanted right ahead. The boys are continuing to put down pressure even with just a solo, knowing that they have a Kraber to work with. Over towards the very north side of this zone, however, we've got teams that set up early. LVH still playing as a duo, and Tohu Tonut lie in wait as Falco picks up another kill. The boys may go down, but the KP that came with that is going to feel so good.
Top 5 remaining here, and we haven't even begun to discuss the major hold by Tohu Tontut and LVH in the buildings there. 2 of the full 3 men still left alive, and this major building no longer playable, a height to be taken as it will be a minor push out from 40% worse, and this could be arguably a great move from them. The height that comes into play from the building on the exterior might be enough to punish that roster, to punish Odyssey from going that direction instead of taking this duo fight exchange.
5 teams, 2 duos. LVH still playing underneath Tohu Tontot are likely going to come into the hands of 40% worse in the next couple of minutes. A lot of these zones will pull outside, and 40% worse's position is slightly better. The other ones, of course, OKS on low ground. Definitely winnable from here as well, depending on how Tohu Tontot play the height.
Now, notably, if 40% worse go 1 position ahead here, they are now officially, at least, past the lead set upon by the likes of Finals Finders here. So playing small and quiet is all that they could potentially desire. But something that I want to discuss even more is LVH. Making it this far, this deep into it, in a position to play from building. They're well within the stack, but could be their potential return. Sadly, it comes without Jay Hanzo.
The moment, as everybody's considering how they want to play this out, it does look increasingly like Odyssey and Tohu are going to clash. Tohu very aware that sharing space is not something they want to do upon their drop from this building. You also have to be aware that you can't initiate onto OKS with a gravity lift followed by an ultimate, since Juso's ult will just be absorbed by a pylon on the low ground, not giving a lot of options to Tohu. Let's not forget about LVH, who are going to throw a wrench into that whole thing.
This is interesting. All 4 of the teams, or at least 4 of our teams, set within the edges of this building, and the trench just alongside it here. The real question being, where do they present? Where do they begin to push out here? Who takes maybe potentially opposite angles to make this one work?
Now, looking at 40% worse. Not going to throw any shots out just yet, but that's just because the smoke is in their way. Catalyst wall going to be used a little bit early by 40% worse, but it walls them in on the same side as Odyssey. Duo versus trio. Tohu Tona know what fight they want to take. They want third party, whatever's going on over there. 40% worse, however, haven't actually taken the engagement just yet, and are waiting as Tohu drop and lose 2 members. They're likely going to go down. OKS moving up to take this, what was supposed to be 4th party, but instead just being the first squad to eliminate one. LVH move out right behind them, and everybody's funneling into this Odyssey corner. 40% worse are still alive.
Into the top 3, Zerfer and Manny prey upon the minor space that they have, finally dropping Bolt to take the fight directly. It's going to be something that puts enough damage down that seals OKS in Odyssey now with the perfect position from above will win your game 4.
That got very scary, and 40% worse did almost make it work with a catalyst wall to start the fight weirdly between Tohu Tonut and Odyssey. OKS also had their moments on the low ground, but weren't quite able to climb up in time. This was still an incredibly close round on Stormpoint, and one that, as you noted, Zephyr, has likely kept 40% worse in the lead.
Yeah, this is something that we have to set upon with the idea that, remember, it is Finals Finders who fall incredibly early on in their take over towards the Bean. As a result, with likely 0 points to be assumed here, it was only a 10-point gap necessary to close by 40% worse. And they didn't even die in 5th, which was, I think, guaranteed to tie them out. They found themselves out in 3rd, an additional extra 3 points, and maybe even potentially some KP in the midst of all that chaos.
I think they got a little bit of it. We'll pull up the standings and see what they're looking like after now 4 games. We have 2 left, and 40% worse do technically lead, albeit only by 2 points.
It is as tough as it gets here, and even more is the fact that LVH making it to that similar end game is going to make it oh so difficult for these teams to find their success here. If you're a roster like Final Finders or Odyssey or Forbidden, your chances of Pro League are oh so slipping away. But granted, there's plenty of games to go. 2 up on the board, and we know just as much as anyone else, the potential for resurgence all the way down to even 10th is still an opportunity.
It's exactly as you say, Zephyr. We are going to take a short break, and then we'll be right back with game number 5. Welcome back to now what is going to be Game 5 of the final preseason qualifier. Zephyr, we're cooking up something special. We're cooking up a winner, and now what we're going to send down today is 5 qualified teams to the Pro League, but it's only the first place spot that can really guarantee anything. Let's take a look at the standings as we prepare for our penultimate game of the day.
Now, during this break, I walked away and I did some math, but it ultimately doesn't matter right now as 40% worse hold the win in their palms here. But if that slips away and if LVH walk into a win, currently they are beating Deathwish by a minimum 230 points with their performance today and with a likely second place finish. But that's the theoreticals. They're currently in the lead. The real question that remains is, can they maintain it? Can they lead? Can they start to form the, well, gap that they need to set this in stone.
It would be really poetic to see really any of these teams come out on top. LVH, for a long time now, coming up on this throughout their consistent performances in the preseason qualifiers, finals finders to have made their way in as well and steal that away. Quite poetic with the name, and 40% worse, of course, with the history that we talked about, and the fact that they have been really performing quite well in the preseason qualifiers, though not quite well enough to put their names at the top of the list in terms of points.
Well, it is an incredibly tight race, from 2 points between them and second all the way down to 8 for the third tie, to then follow more that 12. We are within one good hearty win to shake up our top 5. Past that, additionally, a just solid good game with KP for the top 10 as a whole. And that is always terrifying here. If you find your way out incredibly early on, or if you are eliminated in before you get to those placement points, you're pretty much praying a team like No Time for Scrims or Falafel is walking away with that win.
Yeah, and that's going to be pretty darn tough because, I mean, neither of those teams are in great positions. So we'll see how the last 2 games change that, but it's unlikely that they move all the way up into our top 3, especially with how consistent 40% worth finals finders and LVH have been. LVH, really fun to keep track of, especially during last games. They did drop a member to Villains who, despite their very early fragging, have been falling a little further behind as the day goes on in terms of overall placement.
And it's crazy too, because especially with that last game, we saw the decision making that might have been able to present them with a longer standing existence, right? I mean, especially with what was going to be assumed the effect of cooldowns ahead, and knowing that LVH was a duo, that was the prime opportunity for them to truly make their impact, but it never quite came through here. Something, though, that I do want to bring up is a major congratulations and a hopeful for Odyssey. After that major win in that last game, that now puts them in the position to be contesting for one of those Pro League spots. What was potentially one of the scariest or worst spots coming out of that game might now be a Pinhu, Ludwig, and Chico Pro League roster.
And that itself would be really crazy to watch Odyssey rocket up the leaderboards like that and take the win. It does still require them to go over the heads of these titans who lie in their way, but as we already saw with our first game on Stormpoint, they're very able to do it, and not just do it from a great spot either. Their rotation in, well, it was a good one, was not a simple victory for them, especially having to deal with the likes of Tohu Tontut jumping down onto them, with 40% worse sitting right next door. And let's not forget LVH, who tried to get mixed up in all of that. They had to fight off a lot of squads to do that, and it didn't happen on accident.
No, I mean, a lot of really good pacing and control to the action at hand. I mean, we made mention of it in our own predictions as that game was ticking through. Had they actually presented, gone for the fight, or extended themselves about anyone there, it could have been a quick cleanup from the likes of Tohu or potentially LVH coming out of that building, albeit seconds a little later. Instead of holding steadfast, dropping with the Watson defense, and allowing themselves to just present was enough to lead in that lobby.
Funnily enough, the boys have continued their rampage and are attempting to pick up as much KP as possible. It's been quite funny to watch them play today, knowing that they've got the Pro League spot. However, the way that they've been playing hasn't net them any wins yet. They are still taking every fight, doing what they can to pick up as much KP as possible, and funnily enough, continuing with how they've played out much of the preseason qualifiers so far with a little bit of extra flair.
Now, for the boys, I will say, in 10th right now, they sealed that deal, but something that I have not seen from them that is a factor that they are known for is their impact regarding some of these other rosters. They're definitely a more crafty, meticulous team when it comes to that kind of decision making, and if it comes down to it, they are one of the few teams that can actually be a Pro League decider right now, a Pro League gatekeeper. They already know they're on their way back in, and they are not a roster, especially if you've watched them in semifinals and further. They do not care about dropping on you, sending, and potentially wiping the opportunity away from you making it a pro league. They could literally decide at any point right now that they don't want 40% worse to be a part of pro league and just start messing with them.
Speaking of, actually, what about that mill contest? What? Because as you say, you know, your ability as whatever team to decide, hey, I want to mess with people's games is one thing. Your ability as your own team to decide, hey, I don't want to mess with our games is another that we have to consider. With 3 teams dropping at mill, the chance that you walk out of there alive, well, it may statistically be 33%, feels a lot lower.
Now, I do think LVH aren't actually particularly involved with the mill contest. I do think they are landing nearby, either that at Beast or potentially the separate building there. But the analyzation, I mean, you're on the right track. Potentially throwing that away for the early game should hopefully be a change up in these teams' initial drops. Because as good as mill is, if you can't deliver on success in that contest, and even if you're walking into game 6 dropping another one, you basically guarantee that you aren't walking away with a win today.
Well, it's time to find out, as looks like we're getting Meat Mountain once more out of Silence Esports. Thank you, chat. The rest not really changing, although we have seen a lot of Revenant today, and I've really been enjoying it.
Rev Conduit definitely, apparently the pace of play for a lot of these teams is they are catering towards building that aggression alongside the From the Shadows ultimate, giving that extra 75 health, and then the massive ability to pair with Radiant Transfer. Funny enough, Villains is one of those few rosters who don't actually utilize that. They put all of their faith into King delivering with no level of support, but capitalize on top of that, though, by substitute Bloodhound in, making those smokes even more advantageous, giving them a pseudo-digi at, well, split-second decisions.
And we did see how reliant they are on Rev cooldowns as well. Because you are banking on having a little bit of extra HP and wiggle room on King, with the follow-up from Bloodhound Bang, it does leave you in a slightly more vulnerable position when you don't have ultimates available. So carrying ult excels may actually be something that either they're already doing or that we should see more of out of this roster, because you are gate kept from fights by not having additional shielding available to you. Speaking of fights, however, we've already got one. Native do drop again, this time not over by Mill, but still straight into the arms of another team.
It is going to be Bomba on their success with at least the initial drop, as Scary will be looking for ops rotations, and Miner will see potential opportunity here. Longbow in hand, one crack makes an initial knock. Now in a 1v1 here, Scary. I hope they come back, or they find success here. VJ has left the lobby completely.
Yes, if Scary clutches this, it is going to be
That is
not a good look. We'll see. Arcstar out, just to buy a little bit of space for it, but Scary does not have a lot to work with. Those longbow shots that we saw earlier are not going to happen every time, but they're happening consistently enough that I'm scared. Another 50. Another one. One more shot. Does need to back up, but he finds it! No time for scrims are gone. Scary is exactly that. We'll get to pick up names. This is really, as good as it is really not good.
VJ leaving early there out of frustration, whatever it may be, is a huge issue for that roster now, stuck as a duo, even though they come out on top. Meanwhile, for Odyssey, as good as we like to hype up this team coming through from our break, they now suffered the defeat in Villains outside of the Jurassic area, and that's going to be one of their first resurgences for early KP for this roster, and hopefully the start of their lead.
Making their way all the way back to Pylon now. Gravity Cannon assisting them with that move, puts them in another great spot to play out the ring as well. You can wait over by Pylon and continue farming for kills as Villains. You can think about what other teams are going to make their way in over by Barometer. And for 3 Dragons, interestingly, who landed over by Coastal Camp, they can continue to play out of the south side of this zone. Not a whole lot of teams should be rotating in through that way, and it may provide them more placement points than they've seen the rest of these games.
We'll see if they're able to survive as this lobby continues to accelerate in terms of its aggression. 202, one of those rosters who had shining performances, at least in our second preseason qualifier, today have had, well, yes, some great moments, are still looking for their potential take to get back up on that leaderboard. I know they're secure in their overall placement, or very likely into Pro League, but to secure that win, to stay even more confident above the remnants of stay healthy and more, makes this even important.
Donaghy down. Looks like a res has, or should have, gone off on the other side. There's certainly been the time. 202 are playing with the respect as if it has happened, but now spotting up a knockdown shield and knowing that they've secured one additional KP are going to be very happy to continue their rotation through Cascade. OKS have continued moving further down, and the villains, as we talked about, are continuing to farm KP over on the outside of Pylon King. Again, taking the off angle, this time without the ult, but certainly the mobility to get back to the team will open things up for the rest of the lobby to claim these kills and let villains march right back on into Pylon victorious.
Well, I mean, it's not settled just yet here. Big defense on the other side, but now with presence towards the hill, and yes, cracks in the bow check. It's looking more and more of it. A knockdown shield now removed. It's almost, you just kind of want to see if maybe or not they can get the kill, or if other rosters secure this one out. If it's the villains, you know they need every single point here. So, an extension from King V up towards height. Stick for that battery.
Diff gonna swing on this. No way to push down from the hill either. DiffQ has done a really good job with the bow check of making sure that there's no clean way to walk down. And with Deathwish gone, this just gets even more difficult for them, Zephyr. We've been talking about the Deathwish 40% all day.
Yeah, it's a potential tie that will come into impact if we see one of our 5 win. Meanwhile, though, for talk about the remnants of a fight against Forbidden here. They lost out on Calamitous early. Now with the grab lift in play, we'll look for a bit of a prowler getting its claws into the heat of things against Vast, but leaves it up to a 2v1. Falcons clearing out some of these remnants of the energy barricade, and with the full swing, we'll find them before the black hole makes its impact.
Gotta respect that from Falcons. That was a clean beam, and what a way to keep the team in the game. Handsome Men, unfortunately, not going to be accessing this one, as Forbidden can now make their move into Barometer, where most teams seem to think that this zone will close, although there is still a lot of wiggle room, and I'll be honest with you, Zephyr, I'm not predicting a zone that ends on these buildings, rather one that moves us significantly closer to Jurassic in the long run.
Well, we'll see. Zone is shoring up more directly against the southern side, which tends to correlate towards a deeper pull into the POI. Could potentially right, especially if we make our way back up towards that northeastern nut where it comes out of the choke. That's gonna be a huge issue for these teams in terms of making rotations out. But at least for now, we've got a very dominant hold by 40%. Stay healthy, Falafel, and Finals Finders here making their reappearance. They're not going to let this one slip.
The boys start their journey into Cascade, where it looks like 202 are lying in wait. Could see a very quick fight break out there, perhaps even in the kill feed, as ratting for some kills. Does look like the fight has broken out. Remainder of 40% worse, however. Still just hanging out in Barometer and looking instead to pick up their Evos, are going to have an easier time than most other teams of making their way into a late game situation.
And we do get a confirmation on that next and further zone. We are going to be going even more directly into the heat of Barometer. So we'll have to see how things end up, because that usually ends in quite a stack with the direct Spire in play. A major drop in one of those 2 buildings being potentially one of the sides of that pole. But you claimed and saw this earlier. It is an early start with Rolling Thunder, and energy barricades down, and evac is in play, but you can't take it now, especially with a grab lift from the boys. A push forward from Ozzy Owl starts things off, but an immediate response with a Radiant transfer that saves the day here. If they'd like to leave, they can do it, but maybe they're feeling feisty. Instead, they take to the skies.
And Algs should be okay, even as the last member on the evac tower to make their way through into Jurassic, with Villains right ahead of them, starting off a fight against Silence in that very same POI. It does look like we're pulling a little bit further south this time around, and the Villains, as such, are going to have to make their way through a lot of teams, something that I'm sure they have no problem doing.
You know, they'll plow and mow and shape up against this choke here and look for what I can only assume is that next chunk of damage there. Pineapple Nut Building is taken out and away, and that is Silence of all rosters, the only Caustic in the lobby here, and actually surprisingly makes this a bit difficult with major defenses like the shields from the Newcastle and the Gibraltar's bubble as well. Pushing into Meat Mountain is a true challenge, especially now that you've lost the Forbidden Shadows.
Nades are making this quite difficult, however, on the inside with the bubble down, with gas traps ticking away, now with no mobile cover. There's a lot of resources that got hemorrhaged, but Villains do back off.
They may not rotate well. They might face their difficulties in the direct fights and wombo combos, but Meat Mountain knows how to hold a building here. For Silence, they survive, and those resources are something that we discussed with Villains. They absolutely need to make these exchanges happen here. Now, with teams like 202 shoring up from the northern side, it gets much harder to do that without being immediately punished.
Bit of a rat play here, see what they can find. Scary has already done plenty today, but the boys turn around onto the duo and are going to make this even harder. Bacco does go low, is kind of getting bamboozled around these rocks and goes down without doing much of anything. The boys do suffer a big pick, and now Conduit starting to move the rest of the team back in. It's time for Scary to take the lead once again. Clemmy on 1 HP is going to go down to the ring. Babylon's the last one left, turning to face the duo with Scary down. He's going to try and pop a res, trading this out with Clemmy.
It's going to come down to almost immediate syringe that will force Clemmy down instantaneously here. Babylon's now ticking. At some point, we'll have to look for the heal on this medkit. This is that perfect opportunity, but ultimately comes at the price of health, the price of a ring.
The ring is a cruel, cruel mistress, but credit to Native for sticking it out for so long. We did talk about those syringes super early on. Keep an eye on the kill feed, see if they're able to execute this well. The 202's exit from Jurassic has led them into yet another engagement as they look down on OKS.
It's a nice position to land some of these early and easy shots here. He'll find one, but no more other than that. Granted, putting a team ahead here at a deficit to walk into this next zone is the perfect opportunity for you yourself to exist one further position forward here. We get to tune in directly towards the further impacts of what we'll see in our end game, and that 40% worse building end zone. I mean, this is the one where we see things pull away from that spire, a big drop from above, and a contest between 4 to 5 teams as they hold out on the minor space and the little divots that exist off of the barometer direct.
This is one of those rings where you look at it, and excluding strategy, excluding everything but the story that's led us here, you go, is this plot armor? 40% worse are so comfortable right now. That building really difficult to push, and the only team that can do it, really, a duo, perhaps, for now. Our rotation from 202 will have to wait, but not for too much longer, as they themselves have a lot of distance to cover until joining the duo of OKS in the ring ahead.
202 here will take their shots at an evac, but will ultimately miss out on getting that full wipe there. And granted, it is going to be something that caters back towards Jurassic for the likes of the boys, but as they start to breach into this barometer area, I can't imagine even from behind they won't be facing many difficulties. I love this follow through from 202, but it still doesn't answer the question for either one of these rosters. How will they present? How will they cross this distance? Where will they find themselves? The positions that be.
especially when there's not that many more cooldowns left for 202. They expended a lot of them to get these kills, and now are certain to be focused from the northern end of this ring. But with 14 squads left and the boys gone, 202, yes, they're eating shots from a distance. They don't have that many close by.
With the final closing and taking us directly into the area at hand. The POI that we know here, it's the final moments for teams like Silence to make their rotations. And as good as their hold was, I said it earlier, it's crossing the distance, the long trudging cardio that makes it a true challenge for the likes of Silence. Surprisingly, they aren't fully wiped here, but it is going to be inevitably Villains who, albeit they don't get them on the first time around, find the knocks at the end.
There you go. Here, we'll show you a hold. Well, make sure you never see the inside of this. Silence do go down, and now Villains own the north part of the map. Their next push, taking them into either 202 or NPC likely, as OKS do look out towards the northern end of this ring, but don't actually have a lot of say in how it goes. It's Villains instead that really get to decide how the rest of this lobby plays out. At least for the edge teams.
Right. Wanton and 202, though, looking to be that next fight here on rotation with already a drop down onto Clone early, trying to break down that door. Will inevitably, yes, find full knocks onto Clone once again, but are still looking for additional damages. Surprisingly, they've lost the bitter pieces of what make up Wanted. They have come through and are left with nothing.
Weird how Wanted just managed to get away into the wind like that, but I'm sure they'll be found, as there's really just not that much space left to play in this ring, even with 13 squads. LVH at a critical juncture right now are going to try and play for dominance over the south end of the zone and wall off towards Forbidden. This is a straight 3v3 if they can take it in the next 20 seconds, but LVH are being kept at bay.
I mean, with the thermite ticking out here, they need to find some manner across that distance, and it'll be at the hands of a huge ordnance. Make it two, as Zodiac as eliminated now with only one person left standing. They'll tick away every energy barricade that be to find their fight here to push into the next zone ahead. They still haven't quite sealed the deal, but with their own zoning control in play here, and with Forbidden picked off by the likes of 40%, they've done it.
Great timing on that, and the chances that LVH get sent are very low. For 202, very different story. Everybody and their mother can access this building, and 202 playing on the ropes right now with not even the zone allowing them space to hold. They're going to get shot out the whole way in, and even dropping under the bridge. They've still got to take a fight up against Villains, who they do, granted, eliminate. Nobody else dropping on them just yet, but do you have time to res this, or will anybody from up top start to get a little greedy?
I mean, this is the perfect opportunity, but you have to worry about from below more than anything.
Nope.
Avatar, that was a roster in the steps of the building below. Comes back to pay the price now, knowing that they have that issue to work with as well. Gives the opportunity for Aussie Owl to come back into the fray of things, stick a 3, and bring 202 back into it. But I want to talk about this next zone because I love 202, but their potential of survival is minimal at best here. Instead, we look towards the buildings that be towards that south side, towards 40% worse, and LVH. The only two rosters to truly present well within this zone here. Notably though, Dia, Finals Finders are that team on top. They get to wait things out. They get to make a good claim at this next position here, whether it be on the roof of this building or potentially somewhere else.
I was going to say the roof is honestly the most easily accessible position to Finals Finders. As most teams are running with a horizon, you have simple access that really never leaves you touching the ground to get onto height in the next zone, and then potentially gatekeep teams that are left standing inside the building. It's definitely the clearest play for Finals Finders. Not sure if it's the one that they'll take, but it is still going to be a battle of attrition ultimately up against their real nemesis, 40% worse, who have done so well to predict this zone. 202 go on another push. seeking out any stragglers towards the south end of the zone. LVH have already rotated out. They can still come up behind them. LVH know this is happening, but with low ground, they can't do much.
Literally insane here. They'll find at least some minor damage, and it is going to be percent that finds that knock onto Liffin on the other side. That's why we saw these Dark Veils out early here, but it doesn't cover enough distance for 202. Instead, now with it officially down, they're going to do their best to find the KP that B here with everything else in play. Turn tail around this wall. They need to settle these knocks, or else that'll be it here.
Shield swap needs to come in for Miscam, and it does, just in the nick of time. Rakafaka completely thirsted now, but making it into the top 8. Still a victory for 202 as they've taken bites out of LVH so far. Very little space to play, but still technically in this, and nobody really wants to send it onto 202, because committing to low ground is in itself a death sentence.
It'll be something that guarantees them their success, but this was the question I had. Where did LVH go? Because they're not the wall ahead, and there's no way they test for space on the building. A minor, and I mean little to nothing, crack behind the wall presents them with the opportunity to survive, and you hope 202 or just about anyone is tracking that one out, because it looks like they don't even have the resources to get shielding back up.
We called this out earlier, but those kills, those LVH kills, should belong to Finals Finders. Sitting on roof, may not have the most time to hang out up here, but do still have plenty of it when it comes to the later game. Ordnance has caused them quite a few problems, though. They're getting full sent. Finals Finders need to put up a defense, and they do. 150 on the car is good. It's not quite good enough. The Skynades really did a lot of work, and Finals Finders send it down onto the low ground right next to a rat. Get eliminated. 202 join them. 40% worse. As a result, get to walk on out of this building and right onto the height that should have decimated them.
That was the push that could have sealed the deal here. The problem, though, is that in comparison to how this zone typically plays out, the buildings are leaving much earlier than usual. Now from our Savitar will go for the climb up there for Shiv Manny. Oh, look, Vibe of face their ends here over towards the side. Shiv and crew will hold out, but will inevitably from the low ground be shot out. Manny, the last one left standing, will try their best, but find fourth. It will come at the cost of Falafel as well, though. And now 3 Dragons versus LVH here, surviving as a no help to boot, just a Radiant transfer. Juicy will be picked apart, but a shield swap keeps the dream alive.
3 Dragons as a duo are going to clinch this game. 1 shot left, and they do it. What a game from 3 Dragons, who, playing out of the south side of the zone, had absolutely no right. But we said it moments before, this was a game of duos, Zephyr. I don't know what happened to change this all going into our 5th game of the day, but we had duos to start, 2 duos to finish, duos on duos on duos decided this game. And of course, I mean, 3 Dragons had the most practice doing it.
They may not have the points to qualify, but I'll tell you what, that win a game with impacts here for the rest of this lobby, especially for the likes of LVH as a duo surviving there into the end. That could have been the return for them to sit above the rest, to be this close to the top lobby.
And they should have died. Like, in theory, they should have died, but 40% worse, in a way, save LVH by taking the fight on height and eliminating Finals Finders, making that endgame play out in such a weird way. It does work out well for 40% worse. They do get a lot of points. In fact, I want to take a look at the points before we send it into Game 6, because it is incredibly close moving into our last game. 40% worse have an 8-point lead on LVH, but the difference between those 2 winning is a massive one.
They have extended the gap by a bare minimum, but at least an additional 4 points here now to sit 6 above the rest. But it doesn't change the fact that between Finals Finders, LVH, it is a 3-horse race for for the potential to win here. If that bar continues to raise, it gets ever so more difficult for Forbidden and Odyssey and Villains, but far from impossible.
Yeah, this is going to be very close. It's going to be very exciting, and it's going to happen in just a few minutes. Don't go anywhere, except maybe to hydrate, because Game 6 is coming up right after the break. Well, it's time, Zephyr. All this for preseason qualifiers, and it comes down to this game. This is the final time in the preseason that we'll actually get to see these teams do what they do best and fight for a spot in Pro League, and only one of those spots is available as a result of winning today. So many teams' fates are decided by what happens in this game. Let's take a look at the standings one more time and recap a couple possibilities, because there are several, but it really comes down to two main ones.
So, right off of the bat, the one that we're watching out for the most is the fate of 40% worse, because it fills out two specific situations here. If a team like LVH, a top competitor with lots of PSQ standings, wins, then we get into a situation where Stay Healthy, 202, and the boys walk away with 3 of those qualifying spots, and it comes down to the performance of Deathwish versus 40%. And right now, 40% is leading by 290 points, albeit Deathwish can change that by having a good final game here. The other factor, though, is if anyone else wins, anyone who is not LVH, Stay Healthy, 202, or the boys,
Say like Finals Finders.
say like Finals Finders, or 40% worse, we already know the 4 teams moving in from the overall points.
Okay, so 40% can win, get a spot in Pro League, and then we've got 4 teams making it. Finals Finders can win, get a spot in Pro League, 4 teams making it. LVH can win and force a decider between 40% worse and Deathwish that looks like it's going 40% worse's way. Am I missing something?
if any other team, if a team other than LVH stay healthy 202, the boys are 40% worse wins. 40% worse will not be in Pro League.
Okay.
So they either have to win or LVH has to win.
Two out of three scenarios that I'm seeing here. 40% worse from right now, the 66.6% chance to make it into Pro League. If we're weighting all of these evenly, they're not technically even probabilities, but there are three options. And that's what we're going with heading into this last game. Very few points.
If you ran the lottery, the chance is either you win or lose. 50-50.
50-50. It's 50-50, Zephyr.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what,
worse. Very close.
at the end of the day, the only thing any team really needs to know right now, if it sounds confusing, if you're lost in the sauce and you're getting deep within the spaghetti, just win. Just win.
Just win.
If you win, you go to Pro League. You don't have to worry about the headache that is preseason qualifier points. You just get to have a spot. So aim for that and nothing less.
All right. Well, few teams are in touching distance of that. Again, with the bar being set at 52 points, does make it really difficult for anyone below 7th to make it in, and even NPC would have a difficult time, meaning that 40% worse had to have a very low point game. So we're really looking at our top 3 squads as being those that have the best chance of walking away with the win today, and really any 3 of them could do it, depending, of course, on the performance of the others. This is going to be a game where we'll be keeping track in the background of what is becoming more likely, where the probabilities are shifting as we go on. But once it's over, it's all up to the leaderboard magic behind the scenes. Let's get ready, or hope that we're already ready, because Game 6 starts now and not a second later.
The scary thing, Dia, though, there is a huge issue that is starting to arrive. And it's in the fact that some of these lower teams have no chance today. They're likely to now be in a situation where, if they want to, the impact of their playstyle and their game can be the decider, can be the gatekeeper of so many rosters out there. The boys aren't winning today. It would take an insurmountable super win, right?
Yeah.
But they also know they're secured. So why not decide the fate of these other teams? If you're someone like Falafel at 20 points, you can play the game out to the best of your ability and position wherever you want to be. Or you could say, I don't want this roster in Pro League. I'm going to drop on them.
So you're saying the boys can play God.
So many teams could play God right now.
Yeah. A lot of gods, a lot of gods. Also, I want to apologize to everyone. I did cast or curse the lobby. I said we were starting now and not a second later, and we have to restart. But that's okay, because the restart is already being built up behind the scenes. I want to take personal responsibility. That was my bad.
Dia, shame on you. The lobby has a 50% chance of either starting or not starting.
This just occurred to me. Do kids still do this? Did you do this?
Shame
on you. Did you ever do that?
Shun?
Yeah.
To shun? Yes.
Yeah? Did you do that?
Yeah.
Okay. I find it's always worth asking things like that, because sometimes there are things that you did in your childhood where you're like, that's normal. And it's not normal at all.
You're like 27. You're not like 60, bro. As much as you like to act like it.
This has nothing to do with my age. This just has to do with people having different upbringings.
No, it totally does. It totally does.
Oh, really?
Our producer says not in Europe, though, so maybe I'm wrong. Apparently this is not a thing, which makes actually a lot of sense.
Does it? Do people not have fingers in Europe?
You'd be surprised to find that the digits are but the same, Dia, no matter what country you enter around the globe.
All right. Well, fortunately enough, we're going to get to see those fingers go to work as we are about to get into our next game. You understand, because we're playing games and the games require the fingers. Most of them. I think you can technically play without fingers, but it does get a lot harder.
Hey, funny enough, you literally bring that up. There is a player in this lobby who does not play with his fingers during the off ends. Shiv.
Oh my God, you're right.
Chip plays with his feet sometimes.
You're right. I totally forgot.
I don't think
Whoa.
he's definitely not
No,
playing with his
he's
feet
not
right
playing
now.
with his feet.
No,
That would
no.
be so disrespectful to
But
to preseason qualifiers. But he can, which is,
it's pretty
cool. It is. I don't know when I would need that skill set, but maybe. There's a chance. In this particular lobby, however, I think I should get back to it since the lobby is almost ready to go once again, and preseason quals last game is where we're at. As we said, 3 different possibilities, 66% chance that 40% wins quals.
It's not how that works.
Absolutely how that works.
Do you think that's how that works, bud? What do you think? I don't think Dan knows math. Oh,
that's understandable.
That's
Statistics
fair.
was a really tough topic. Statistics was tough for me.
This is what they win, by the way, if they make it through PSQs.
Yeah. Just the Nessie. We should send them all Nessies. It would be nice.
All right, well,
we are waiting on restarts and things like that, mostly because players want to make sure that they are nice and connected and fair enough. We also want them to have a good competitive experience. It's just taking a moment to breathe before Game 6. The calm before the storm.
well, not much to say in terms of where these teams will end up after this one other than the Pro League ahead here. So I guess the only thing to think of now is kind of analyzing where, at least for you, Dia, from what you've seen from not just today, but also what we have gotten out of No Days Off, as well as passionate players, who do you think stands the test of this upcoming Pro League? Because we talk about it, the likes of VZN, what was then into the J-Lings roster, came from PSQ's last time around and went on to be a very successful entity within their first split. So, do you think anyone potentially rivals those kinds of capabilities?
That's a good question. I always find that coming from either preseason qualifiers or challenger circuit, it does make for a really difficult entry into the Pro League. I do think that players have a good start, but I think that we have almost a better shot from teams that have managed to make it this far and have gotten this many reps in the preseason qual experience, because part of the advantage to that is that you get that much more time to develop your playstyle, whereas if you start in, especially in the first 2 preseason quals, and you have a playstyle that's clicking slightly better than everyone else in the new season, you just kind of get to roll with that and not get as much practice in the aftermath facing off against the competition the likes of which you face in the PSQs. So I think that we're more likely to see one of our later teams have a better start in Pro League, but that's just me. Is somebody standing out to you? Is somebody thinking?
At least for me, before we jump into this game, I am excited for the remnants of players. Fitu making his return after years of long pushers. Kazik in his first representation of what kind of caliber he brings to a roster outside of his presence on 789 is a huge storyline we'll have to follow. And then Jukes, kind of a newer face that has existed previously well within the Apex community, but not on this level here. So, for them and many others who have already made their claim, send 5 more rosters to join alongside them after this match.
Yes, somebody's joining players. Somebody's going to go toe-to-toe with them after today, and many somebodies, in fact, as again, this game determines not just the fate of our one first place team, but so many others alongside them. We are, in fact, beginning game number 6 now, the final game of the preseason qualifiers, and the one to determine what teams are going to Pro League.
A tough weight upon the shoulders of many on their way potentially here, but for so many of these other rosters, a threat, a massive issue at hand to survive against the Wolves here in their final Game 6 performance. Like I said before we got into this game, so many of these teams can be either playing their best Apex or be playing with fates at hand.
You get to decide so much of how other teams play this out. And we've seen it happen already with Natives fights over at Mill and at Cedo. They have single-handedly changed the leaderboards, whether it be LVH coming in to clean them up or Native landing once again for the fight. Alternator early up against the flat line, but seems to be going just fine for Name. Again, BJ does go down early, but Name is crushing it with the alternator right now and leaving Native in the lead.
A 30-30 R99 in hand for Scary is just not allowed here. And for Native, they are successful once again on the... But this time around, retain all members of their roster, albeit do it 3-4 times as fast.
This is a much better look for them, and Ceto, I believe, came with crafting this time around. So a much better start in terms of the loot that they'll get after this as well. 40% worse. Still playing around Mayfish Farms, rest in peace, Devastated Coast. Not fantastic for an early loot path, but if you're planning to play around the edge anyway, 40% worse do have a nice amount of time to move here without too much pressure from other squads and make their way up towards the north and increasingly northwest side of the map.
And this is a terrifying end zone because it does not really lend itself very well to any team that can currently see the secondary rotation. Checkpoint still well and available, albeit we like to think it a little bit more western. While yes, the hot dog buildings, or trenches as I like to call them, up there are the most common pull for this with this full iteration. Often, sometimes it does work its way back towards that southeastern side if you aren't careful. For the likes of 40% worse and Final Finders, they are far and away from the zone. LVH, though, just a handful of a distance out from the west.
You know, this is one of those rings that I find looks a lot better for teams that are playing around the edge and they're taking early fights, much like Deathwish are right now, fighting for their very tournament lives. Just remember, their points against 40% worse mean quite a bit right now. An extra nade gets thrown in here, and we should see Meat Mountain fall. Silence do go down so quickly, but Deathwish did give him a run for their money. Both sides of that suffering pretty severely in the health pools, just Silence suffering more critically.
This is going to be something that puts them 3 points up now on the board. It doesn't push them past 17th on the overall roster, but one big thing we missed out on in the heat of that fight is Wanted getting involved, wiping out Shiv, and paying their respects to the likes of 40% worse. This is what I talked about when I said anybody can make this happen here. And while it's likely that they might have that banner, for 40% worse, losing out on him is a huge issue. They have not gotten the banner. Still stuck out and away.
It's really difficult to get there as well. Makes me wonder what Shiv was even doing that far away from the team, but Monday's going to send it across. See if he can recover the banner, as he is on Horizon, probably the best person to do it. Just a couple seconds left, but playing this game out as a duo, ratting for points like they'd have to, doesn't seem good for them. Here we go, dropping down onto the low ground. Does look like he's going to get away with this. Odyssey, however, not going to get away with anything, as we've dropped down to 17 squads in this game already. Another accelerated pace.
And you can tell teams are taking the punch at this one. Villains who start out in Pylon have negative rotation to the starting point of 40% worse to look, to pay, to try, to punish here. For OKS, they themselves, in their own difficulties though, stuck out behind some spiders and some damage that bees, as spiders apparently have bullets as well. It will be Native on their second wipe.
The fact they've managed to pick up 2 full team kills at this point of the game is pretty insane. It's so good for them to have been able to do that. I'm not sure if it's going to be enough. In fact, I suspect that it won't be, but to continue that momentum is already fantastic for them. 202's fight towards the north is a little bit hairier. They do have control over high ground for right now. It is up against Deathwish, playing with some knockdown shields, have serious damage being thrown out by Genos.
Genos, though, will face difficulties in return here, as it's still left up to Danny to finish this off in the 1v1. A shield swap seals death wishes fate. They walk away with just 4 points. That'll tie them out, or no, keeps them at 17th here. And when we talk about the overall point tie now, if LVH win this game and they walk away with the series win as a whole, it should be 40% worse now that beat this one out and get into Pro League. But it's going to come down to some very specific math, and I'll tell you what, the teams don't care about math. They just kill and care about KP.
Yep, this is
insane.
where we leave it all. Your last chance on the preseason quals finals stage is going to be one fraught with gore. The boys started today with that philosophy, and it looks like they're ending it with that philosophy as they move on up, playing around the hot dog buildings that you called out earlier, with Clemmy going low and going down. Leaves Babylon's right behind, who was frying earlier today, this time connecting on the hip fire for not nearly as much, as Spaco going low as well. Babylon's left alone, the boys likely going out. Another knock going to come in from behind. Babylon can find a shield swap if he gets if he gets the right thirst.
8 batteries in hand, more than enough to survive as we'll say goodbye to handsome men in the meanwhile in this 1v1. A door ahead here, one not claimed by them. Instead, a recovery that needs to be had and happened at a heady with the wingman. Down to top 9, and LVH, after hearing the shots, are gonna get involved. This is absurd.
It is, but I wouldn't have it any other way, Zephyr. This is the way that our finals have always been when everything is on the line like this and when kills matter more than almost anything. LVH, who can change everything just by picking up a win today, are several points behind making that happen, but have certainly made one up with Liffin's most recent knock, and now a squad wipe almost surely to come in. The boys go down, 2 KP get secured by LVH, and they move that much closer to a top spot.
LVH pick up the 3 KP that B to close the very minor distance ahead here. Something notable, though, is the fact that in all of this chaos, Final Finders were almost entirely eliminated here. It looks like they might be able to pull for a minor recovery outside the pylon, but we're not showing on the map. They've got to be careful. There is a team just south of them. Now for LVH to defend against Goner, Savitar,
Oh no. And they don't stop coming, Zephyr. Everybody is showing up to the hot dog buildings. Fluffle with a gold car do feel pretty comfortable, but approaching these buildings, especially without a previous shield break or some sort of crack to open you up and close this distance, is pretty difficult. Relatively isolated fight for now, but 202 are starting to make their way in. This is going to be a 3-way battle.
A massive leap from Falafel will come out with punishment. Nye looking for response will find Liffin down, and while looking for the full wipe, gets punished as a result. 202 though, hearing these shots, being just as aggressive on a round 2 close, are here to potentially finish the job and send us to our top 6 remaining.
Oh my, I cannot believe he didn't get that knock, actually. Through the Catalyst reinforced, or rather reconstructed door, Rakafaka does push Vaves back from punishing the res, then jumps onto the roof, goes down to Jay Hanzo. We're back to a 2v2.
Hanzo now sitting on 1. Vaves with the R99 in hand pulls it off. A bit of defense going to give Jay Hanzo the opportunity to reset. If you are an LVH, they're probably all you secured with points, but you're looking for wins.
Could do it still. This is an extremely slow fight, and Rakafaka is just now getting back into it. Doesn't look like they have the meds to really play as safe as they'd like, but if we're going to pop a med kit and go forward knowing that Radiant Transfer has their back, LVH forced to disengage, eat shots in the back. Misscam not going to give this up, but a turn on the head peak takes Misscam out.
Ozzy Owl positioning out far from a distance here. Supported by the Radiant Transfer in a 2v2 scenario. Brings up that Dark Veil. They're going to take the time to get Miskim back in it. And this is the perfect opportunity for LVH to push. Giving all that pressure away just means you're guaranteed to have an advantage here. Big damage down, drop Miskim. It's now a 2v2 with a minor revive unsustained. Radiant transfer, full peek on the other side, a return onto LVH, and the drop that sends 202 home.
That took so long, and LVH do manage to pull it off in the end. 202 with their perma resetting eventually get punished, and that is the only thing that was happening on that side of the map. The only two squads that were left there. Everyone else is fighting, whether in Cascade or in Ceto, currently fighting for their very lives. 40% worse. Had just run up on Finals Finders, the squad in second. But Zephyr, when I tell you no one is in zone, no one is in the next ring, I am not joking. Nobody is there. Everyone is fighting around the edge of the ring. Ceto Station is a mess. Forbidden are out. 5 squads are left, and round 2 hasn't even finished.
NPC come out on top of that one. A roster in 7th who need all the more and the world here. Instead, this is something you'll love to see with a drop on to Far Vihar. 40% worse are taking matters into their own hands. This is the remnants of Final Finders, mind you, who are down to a single member here on the northern side of zone. 3 dragons, they themselves as well. I can't believe I'm saying this. This is absurd.
It is. In every sense of the word, Zephyr, this is just... Well, it's a bit unhinged, if I'm honest, but I can't say that I expected much else. With so much on the line, and especially with teams who have qualified to today with such incredible fragging potential, it's no surprise that 40% worse are looking for another fight against one of the last 4 remaining squads.
Dia, if Robin and them get eliminated here in this exchange with 40% worth, if NBC go down, it is guaranteed that 40% get into Pro League. If they wipe this roster, they don't even have to win this game because the only other 3-person team in the lobby is LVH. There
just won't be enough points.
There's not enough points. At 40% worse,
though.
they have to win this. They have to win this.
Catalyst wall out to the side. Shiv, very separated from the rest of the squad. Likely going to go down in this ring. This is zone 3. There's not a whole lot of time to survive. NPC turn around. Wingman in their hands as well. Takes down Zerafer. 40% worse are not looking like they're going to win this fight. It would take a miraculous 1v3, and from zone, it's not going to happen. That one win that they needed to clinch qualification into the Pro League didn't happen, and now it's up to the scores. It's up to whatever happens behind the scenes. NPC have the driver's stick, driver's whatnot, in the southeastern side of the ring. LVH, still alive and on height, can win this.
If you are a 40% worse fan, you are suddenly the biggest LVH fan in the world here. It's potentially guaranteed they walk away with the win, but if they don't have enough points to not only eclipse 40% worse, but more importantly, not enough to eclipse the final rat of Finals Finders, 40% worse will not go to Pro League. It's never the place you want to be. It's never the opportunity you want to be seen lost at the hands that aren't even yours, but it's all that exists.
And with the points getting incrementally higher over the next couple of rounds, they are going to be given a run for their money. 40% worse, I mean. The points that they hold, while they should look nice, while they should be comforting, are far from a guarantee, and LVH are basically guaranteed this win right now. They do have an incredible amount of high ground. They have so much control. 3 Dragons and Finals Finders are both rats. It's 1 3v3 that LVH have to win. But the way that NPC were playing moments ago could make it a little more complicated.
Bren still well and within it. That is something that is going to be so impactful here for this end game. Starting to make their way into the territory held by LVH. Has to be so respectful. Getting caught out means instant death here and potentially your shot at Pro League diminished. All Finals Finder want to do, all Bren wants to do is survive.
I think LVH know, or at least suspect, that this is happening. The audio, perhaps enough to find that last member.
Oh.
They do have, I think Liffen having called this out earlier. With
There it
Hanzo
is.
looking for an angle, they really can't drop down. LVH don't have a horizon to make this retake of height easier. Might be better to play for the end game. Braver and a wingman.
And that's Finals Finders. We're down to our top 3 and a single member of 3 dragons. That likely sets the fate of Final Finders in stone. Not potentially on their way to Pro League, but realistically, if you want to make sure it is set, if you want LVH on their way, they've got to win this.
And they can, with NPC sitting in the building ahead of them. It's just a matter of smart use of cooldowns. Catwall can cut off their sightlines completely. And NPC have even given up the building right ahead of Jay Hanzo. With plenty more time on the zone close as well. 10 seconds till this starts to move in. And Hanzo's already off of the height, rejoining the team. Kraber not going to connect out of Vaves, but it just takes one hit.
One big thing to note here is that NPC do not have position in zone whatsoever and are going to be forced to make a heavy rotation in the next 40. The same, surprisingly, can be Severjuzzi on 3 dragons here as a solo member coming from that eastern side. You have to be careful. Ooh, from the height there, a heady for a massive 280. It's just the fact that it's a Revenant saves the day, but with all 3 members quickly eliminated, LVH is the odd with the win on the belt. They're likely your winners of the day.
Yeah, I mean, there's one member of 3 dragons left, and they're just going to go down to the zone, not wanting to fight it out in the end, and fair enough. They clinched their win today, and a 2nd place. This was as a duo that 3 dragons performed, but with LVH finding a win, there's a crucial element to that. KP was denied 1 point missing from LVH, and while we do know that I think this should have gone in LVH's favor, that 1 point could make the difference. It's good.
Don't forget, Dia, LVH was the most prosperous roster on top of 6 additional KP, tack in 3 for their win, tack in another for Bren as a solo. That's 10 plus 12, 22 overall. That alone, if I'm looking at this correctly, sets them at a 66 point minimum from the math that I was keeping track of, right?
Well, I'll be honest, I don't think 40% worse made that, based on the very little and admittedly limited math that I was keeping track of.
Well,
but
it's something we're going to have to check out here, but the bigger question that we'll be discussing afterwards, more than anything, will be how do these overalls shake out now that LVH, a team who was guaranteed to get in based on their overall standings, right? Walk in given the kind of general position that they were playing from, now is no longer a potential team whatsoever.
yeah, very, very true. This is a very scary place to be as any team that is hoping that you make it into Pro League today. I can't help but feel, Zephyr, like, let's say that LVH win, right? They win on the day.
Right.
Surely 40% worse would still make it in this scenario.
Well,
because of their... Go ahead.
Yeah, it comes down to their performance. To be honest, no one's really truly secure. It really does come down to average performances across the board. But something to note is that at minimum, with 20th place giving 900, teams like Stay Healthy and 202 are well above this kind of 4,000 point margin. And when we break it back down to the next closest teams, especially with 3 dragons now likely outdo the bans this morning, no one breaches 4,000 with their current points, right? So those teams are guaranteed at the bare minimum. When we bring it down to the next closest, we look at 40% and Death Wish. And that one ultimately comes down to performance on the day of. 40% worse may not have won, but the fact that they played well today might be the difference between Pro Leaguer.
I can't help but be nervous for what we've seen so far
Everyone
today.
wants 40% worse in Pro League, man. Even me. I'm not even gonna
Yeah.
lie, bro.
I mean, they're very close
I'll be biased
to
there.
having done it. Zephyr, we do still announce the winner of today and
Alright.
those that get their Pro League qualification spot, regardless of Challenger Circuit points or
It's true.
preseason points.
I'll tell you what, it's still something to be held. It's still an accomplishment that joins you alongside No Days of Passion and players to the surprise of nobody. It is none other than LVH.
He breathes, finally knowing
Good
that
job.
LVH took it. It was really close. It was very, very close.
Really?
But like it was close in the last game. The last couple of points, like you said, moving them up to 66, probably made that a lot healthier of a gap between them and 40%. However, I do want to take a look at our standings, see how big that gap was, because there were a couple of kills picked up by 40% along the way, and they
Second.
69 points. Nice.
Se-
This is
Nice. LVH walk away with that win to join No Days, Passion, and Players, but this is what really matters here. A huge shout out to NPC with their points, albeit it won't be enough alongside Finals Fighters, Forbidden, but 40% worse with 1,440 points now for their overall preseason qualifier points is going to be something that puts them very high up in terms of a contest for their success. They walk away with 3,890, I believe, which, depending on how everything else plays out with Death Wish and more, could potentially be enough here. One big thing, though, we are basing a lot of this data on is the fact that with Sunzi's ban on 3 Dragons, they are eliminated, losing out on his points.
Now, I just want to clarify, because I personally didn't get contact from EA Respawn on this.
Right.
Is that a confirmed thing, or is this just we're basing everything on this right now?
That is what we are basing this on. Until this is completely confirmed, which it's the powers that be, the Battlefy that be. That is what something. This is the reason why we might be confident is that with 3 Dragons facing bans earlier, they lost out their position within the PSQs, losing their points. So the same is to be assumed with 3 Dragons. So, with that following suit, it's likely that they are not going to be making impacts on the overall, but ultimately should be fine.
Yeah, everybody, wait for official EA ruling on this, of course, but that's what it's looking like for right now. 3 Dragons still putting up a pretty remarkable performance as a duo, getting into 6th place. It's pretty good. Let's take a look at how LVH compare to our other squads as well, since we've got our player stats to compare across the multiple preseason qualifiers. This is just to break down exactly how each squad ended up doing, and I think that there's an argument to be made here, Zephyr, especially with what we were talking about earlier with how everybody would sort of scale into Pro League. A lot was done by Passion on their individual day, much more, dwarfing any other squad.
Yeah, I mean, already right off the bat there, you can see from the numbers that we have a insane 53 KP picked up by this roster and an absolutely insurmountable damage total from the likes of EQ, 0-0, and Denze. And to be honest, does it surprise anybody here? Some of the most aggressive players from a combination of your Vortex, Passion, and Nightmare rosters from previous Pro League iterations. It's easily the most star-studded to come through the PSQs this season, and while that day was close, and we'd love to discuss the data, because I'll tell you what, players do get their shining moments on that day. Kozak with 10,000 damage. It is still something that has yet to be replicated.
Hmm. I have to agree. The last time we saw teams like Passion in Pro League, it was difficult to have the same performances that they had in the preseason quals in Challenger Circuit. Players looking good as of right now, and I'm certainly looking forward to teams like LVH and No Days Off, who, No Days Off, I'm specifically curious to see how they've grown between first preseason qual and ultimately Pro League, that again will be starting at near the end of January. We will be taking a break as the ALGS until the holidays are over and everybody is back for the start of Pro League, but this is a great place to start basing some early assumptions on and start thinking about how these teams that have qualified up may impact some of your favorites. I do want to take a look as well at our overall Challenger Circuit leaderboards that should be able to give us the next couple of points. We are waiting on Battlefy to actually finish updating that, so it could be a little while here, but it should give us, Zephyr, the confirmation of what teams have made it and what teams have not.
Yeah. Something that I'd like to discuss, though, that, I mean, we kind of don't, there's so much history that exists among a lot of these players. The only handful that don't is Jukes, obviously, from players who, well, yes, did participate in some early competitive embers back in 2020, and furthermore, realistically, this is the first true opportunity for Jukes to be performing within Pro League. Jay Hanzo making a name for himself off of LVH today, and then the entirety of No Days Off. I don't know if you folks know this, but Tego, Plexus, Sherbert have been main fixtures, at least, you know, competing within that tier 2 scene for a very, very long time. It's just now that they finally got their chance to shine and make their impacts. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying, Dia, that, I mean, it doesn't leave me worried, but ultimately, when we start to discuss things like how we match up against Pro League teams, having something like these PSQs to get a taste of that action, get that practice in, is so important from a roster like that, who, in comparison to our other major winners, doesn't quite have that same background.
You know, it's funny because I'm going to compare this to something super niche, so get ready, Zephyr. But we've talked about the difference between levels of competition in the ALGS before, from just playing on the ranked ladder to then moving into the Challenger Circuit and preseason qualifiers, and then moving into Pro League. And it's a lot like learning how to swim, then being on a swim team, and then being asked to play water polo. They all have a lot of things in common. But there's also a lot that you have to learn on the fly. And I am really curious for, as you say, the teams and the players that don't have already predisposed Pro League history behind them, how they'll adapt. Because that's always the question, and it's going to continue being that. It's the challenge that up-and-coming talent always have to put themselves up against, and that continues to make it really exciting when they meet those bars that get set for them externally.
Well, it's something that they have the chance in time to work with more than anything. We're going to be looking at that, especially as we make our way through the rest of today, right? Because past that moment, when we get into the kind of off season and then the at least month that we have before we get into Pro League, there's going to be a lot of practice, a lot of fixtures for them to catch up. It's not just going to be thrown to the wolves, albeit it may seem like it is so.
That is true, and especially the early couple of days of Pro League is going to have a lot of people adjusting, which is your benefit. You also get a lot of new rosters that are competing with some of them for the first time together. That gives you time to catch up. I also want to say, from now until then, this is starting, as we said, in late January. You do have time in order to, I'm looking for the word, participate in Pro League scrims that'll be happening until then. And now that you have your spot secured, most of the time you'll actually get into those and be able to figure out, perhaps preemptively, what's been going on behind the scenes with your team and how you can continue to improve that before the Pro League.
Now, I will say, outside of this kind of information, we can discuss some of the other factors that we know are confirmed more than anything. The likes of the boys, right, especially, they're also part of this list. We came into today knowing that they were guaranteed no matter what to be going to Pro League based off of their raw points, and placing up in the higher ends means they themselves will also be on their way. But, whoa! I believe...
Okay, I think we're seeing OBS things.
All right, no worries. All right, well, I'll say...
We're ready.
We're with that, whoa, you probably can assume what I just noticed. We're going to take ourselves over to the other 4 rosters, the other 4 who have achieved their overall point standings to move on to Pro League.
All right, time to find out, at long last, what Battlefy has confirmed. Our winners, of course, No Days Off Passion players in LVH, but via points, Zephyr, who's made it?
Via points, the boys, of course, lead, like we said, with 4,890. 202, 3 Dragons Stay Healthy follow behind. As of this moment, without any further confirmation from Respawn and EA, 3 Dragons are officially in the Pro League after what was their points. I will confirm for those that are curious, though, that the other following points are 40% worse at 3,890 and Forbidden at 3,830 here. So, at least for this moment, congratulations to the 4 that met.
Yeah, you can keep your eyes on how this all plays out by following us at GG_versus. Versus will be producing not just the preseason qualifiers for EMEA, but also those for North America that'll be happening in just about 5 hours, Zephyr. So we'll see you guys back here for North America if you're not asleep by then. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for the preseason qualifiers once more. This was the last one before Pro League. We've got a lot to look forward to during Pro League, as well as we'll be running the Challenger Circuit alongside it. Zephyr, any last thoughts?
No, it's been one heck of a journey, and today was as tight as it became for so many of our rosters out here. And with only a month to spare, there's, like you said, only so much time for them to achieve the greatness that might one day see them at land.
All right, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will catch you back here with more preseason qualifier action and eventually the Challenge Circuit right back on Versus.